Chapter 1307. The hostility in the field increased sharply. All eyes became unkind and full of killing intent. "Look, Lin Sun is dead for sure," Gu Tianyi transmitted to Qi Yao with a complacent smile. His words had stirred up the whole situation, which made him very happy. "You've offended Lin Sun badly." Qi Yao frowned, feeling a little angry. It was she who had told Gu Tianyi about the relationship between Alu and Lin Sun. If Lin Sun pursued the matter, she would also remember it. Deep down, she really didn't want to be enemies with someone like Lin Sun. As early as in the realm of immortals, she knew what a terrible character Lin Sun was. Since he dared to come, how could he be stupid enough to court death? Gu Tianyi smiled disapprovingly. "It's just offending a dead man. What's there to worry about?" Qi Yao said no more. She had already decided to draw a line between herself and Gu Tianyi. "Lin Sun, is what you said true?" Bai Longting, dressed in a white robe, spoke. His voice was like the morning bell and evening drum, resounding through the world. All eyes in the field also looked at Lin Sun. The atmosphere suddenly tensed up, and it was as though swords were drawn. It was like a pack of wolves eyeing a prey, but now another wolf wanted to save the prey. It would infuriate everyone. Lin Sun paid no attention to all of this. He raised his head and gazed at the figure that was overcoming the heavenly tribulation in the sky. He took a deep breath and said, "Alu, just focus on overcoming the heavenly tribulation. No one can touch you while I'm here." His voice was calm and resolute. He stood there alone, looking down on the crowd as if he were nothing. His posture was that of one man holding the pass against 10,000 enemies. The faces of the crowd darkened, and they revealed their killing intent. Lin Sun's words made them completely understand that Lin Sun was here to save people. This left them in disbelief. Did Fiend Celestial Lin really think that he could shake the situation in front of him alone? It should be known that there were thousands of strong people in the arena, and there was no lack of famous figures in the upper 9 realms. Did he think he could save people by himself? It was ridiculous, even ridiculous. "Brother!" Under the heavenly tribulation, Alu's eyes turned red. He was already on the verge of despair, and his body was about to shatter. However, at this moment, there was an indescribable excitement and warmth that flowed through his entire body. Earlier, he'd already held the resolution to die, and he'd rather be annihilated in the heavenly tribulation than allow others to obtain the fortune he possessed. But the appearance of Lin Sun gave him an unexpected surprise. "Stop talking. Focus on transcending the tribulation. At worst, we'll die today. I want to see just who can do anything to us brothers." Lin Sun's black hair was flying in the air, and his cold eyes were like lightning. He glanced at the audience, and an invisible horrible breath spread from his body, which made the weather change. Many people held their breaths and their expressions changed slightly. In these 2 years, the upper 9 leveled has given birth to many unparalleled overlords. For example, Xiao Hao, Fairy Wu, Yuan Fatian, etc. But who could forget demonic god Lin? Perhaps there was little news about him in these 2 years, but as long as he appeared, he would definitely set off a storm. Now, Lin Sun wanted to fight against all the heroes present. It seemed ridiculous, but even if they could kill him in the end, who could guarantee that they wouldn't be dragged down by Lin Sun? In just 2 years, he has already stepped into the 6th retribution of longevity. Some people's hearts trembled as they sensed the horror of Lin Sun's breath. 2 years ago, when Lin Sun was still in the 3rd retribution of longevity, he killed the underworld child, who was in the 4th retribution of longevity, and made him flee in panic. How terrifying would his combat power be now? Lin Sun, you really can't be so naive to think that you can stop us all by yourself, can you? Bai Longting's face had a touch of coldness. He was very conceited and had a strong foundation. He was neither afraid of Lin Sun, nor would he look down on him because of that. "You can try." Lin Sun glanced at him with a cold expression. He didn't know where Bai Longting came from, but even if he did, he wouldn't care at all. Today, he would save Alu no matter what. He would kill anyone who stood in his way. Humph! I didn't know that you, Lin Sun, are so loyal. You dare to gamble with your life for a person who is about to die. Unfortunately, none of the people present will agree with you. Underworld Child said coldly. His body was blurry and covered in armor, and his killing intent was monstrous. How dare a loser like you speak so boldly? Do you dare to come and fight me? Lin Sun's eyes were full of killing intent, and his voice was like a clap of thunder. It shocked the souls of many experts present and made them see stars. Underworld Child's face suddenly became extremely ugly. His defeat at Lin Sun's hands was regarded as the shame of his life. Now that it was mentioned in front of everyone, he almost went crazy with hatred. Lord Underworld Child, don't be provoked by him. He is deliberately stalling for time. Later, we only need to attack together, and it will be enough to crush him. A young man said in a deep voice. Die. In the distance, Lin Sun's expression was cold. He stretched out his finger and pointed at the air. Boundless world. Ah! A finger force appeared out of thin air, and like teleportation, it poked a bloody hole in the young man's throat. Then, his body and spirit exploded in an instant, and both his body and spirit were destroyed. The power of one finger killed a strong man in an instant. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed at the same time. Even Bai Longting, Underworld Child, and Qi Yao's eyelids twitched, and their expressions were slightly dignified. They were thinking about how to break this move if they were to face it head-on. If you are not afraid of death, just come and see if I, Lin Sun, can take it. Lin Sun's voice was cold, and his momentum became more and more frightening. His whole person was like a big abyss that wanted to swallow up the world and choose people to swallow. Many people were restless, and they looked at each other with flickering eyes. This is power. 2 years of silence can't erase his impression in people's hearts. Qi Yao sighed in her heart. A single person was facing enemies from all directions alone, yet he was still able to remain so calm and unstoppable. It was truly too shocking. This was the power of killing. From the immortal burning world to the upper 9 realms, in all these years, how many famous and powerful figures had died in the hands of demon god Lin? Shameless boasting. Finally, someone in the dark couldn't help but attack. He took out a divine sword and directly slashed at Lin Sun. The magnificence of this divine sword ran through heaven and earth, illuminating the universe. This was not a tentative attack, but a fierce blow with all his strength. It was incomparably overbearing. Clang! Almost at the same time, the broken sword swept out. It was as white as snow, and it turned into an illusory light, blocking the sword. Clang! The harsh collision resounded in the void. The divine sword was shaken to the point that it was buzzing and flying backward. At the same time, a strong man in the dark staggered and suffered a backlash. This was a young man in linen from the White Dragon Deer bloodline. He was an extremely terrifying freak, ranked in the top 30 of the Tianjiao Golden List. But with just one blow, not only did he not gain an advantage, but he also suffered a hidden loss. This shocked many people again. It should be known that in the past 2 years, some old strong men on the Tianjiao Golden List had been blown away by the wind and rain and replaced by some rising ruthless people. This young man in linen was one of them. But he was defeated by Lin Sun as soon as he attacked. How could people not be surprised? In the past 2 years, Demon Lin has become more and more terrifying. Many people were bitterly disappointed. Everyone, we can't let him go on. Let's attack together. A man in the dark shouted and turned into a flowing light, rushing to Lin Sun. This was a man with a thin figure, and his entire body was enshrouded in brilliant silver light. There was a crystalline horn on his forehead, and there were mysterious symbols circulating around it. There was no doubt that this was another extremely powerful figure. Old Toad, Dahe, you protect Alu secretly. I'll kill the enemy. Lin Sun transmitted his voice. Then, his figure rushed out violently. His whole body seemed to be burning, turning into a chaotic furnace, swift and violent like a divine rainbow. He launched an attack, punching out with his fist. Boom! Heaven and earth collapsed, and the void was in disorder. This punch was incredibly powerful, like a god lifting an ancient divine mountain and smashing it into the sky. The power of the Great Way was blazing and terrifying to the extreme. Whoosh! When Lin Sun's figure passed by the one-horned man, the fist strength directly shattered the magic treasure and the man's arm. The terrible fist strength spread and destroyed half of the man's body, causing blood to flow unceasingly. It was too fast. The incomparably domineering blow directly injured and almost disabled a top figure who had also stepped into the sixth retribution of longevity. Kill! Several figures rushed out from the nearby area, attacking Lin Sun together from different directions. Buzz! A big abyss appeared around Lin Sun. As he performed his own Tao and Law, the big abyss seemed to be rotating, emitting a terrifying and boundless devouring power. All the attacks were destroyed and refined by the big abyss before they could get close. This, someone exclaimed. The current Lin Sun was simply invincible, giving people a feeling that he was unshakable. Puff! A punch burst out, and the head of the strong man who had just exclaimed was directly blown up, and the headless body fell to the ground. At the same time, in other directions, Lin Sun used his fists and fingers at the same time. In an instant, the 9 changes of Calamity Dragon, the 9 strikes of Shaking Heaven, the void-breaking finger of Dian, and other magical methods were displayed wantonly. Puff, puff, puff. For a time, all the strong men who besieged Lin Sun were killed domineeringly one after another, as if they were made of paper. Scarlet blood poured between heaven and earth like torrential rain. The invincible demonic power released from Lin Sun changed the color of the universe. Too strong. As if he was invincible, bathed in the enemy's blood, he attacked between heaven and earth. Hurry up! Let's go together! Someone shouted in the field. Everyone could see that Lin Sun was establishing his prestige. He wanted to use bloody means to shock the crowd and destroy their fighting spirit. They must stop him as soon as possible. In fact, I don't want to be your enemy, but unfortunately, you are in my way to snatch the opportunity, so you must die. A soft sigh resounded between heaven and earth. Bai Longting, dressed in a white robe, finally moved at this moment. His eyebrows were like lightning, and his figure was as straight as a spear. As he stepped forward, a monstrous murderous spirit also spread, surging between heaven and earth, causing the void to distort and wail incessantly, as if bowing its head in submission. P.S. This is a patch. Chapter 1308. Bai Longting had made his move. The crowd was in high spirit. In the past 2 years, Bai Longting had been one of the most eye-catching overlords in the upper 9 realms. What's more, Lin Sun's reputation was not much worse than that of Lin Sun 2 years ago. He was talented and powerful. It was said that it wouldn't be long before he triggered the 7th immortality test. The attack of such an overlord was naturally exciting. Must die? Who do you think you are? How dare you talk big in front of me? Lin Sun's face was cold. He punched a strong man beside him and killed him. Blood splashed everywhere. Then he rose into the air and charged at Bai Longting. You are too arrogant. Bai Longting's expression was indifferent. He gently waved the feather fan in his hand, and a 5-colored divine rainbow immediately appeared. It turned into a 5 elements wheel, and it rumbled as it crushed through the void like a huge millstone. The wheel of 5 elements. This was a terrible method of longevity. It was entwined with the power of the 5 elements. When the 5 elements gathered, it was enough to temper the universe and crush everything. Moreover, when the wheel of 5 elements rotated, the power of the 5 great ways circulated endlessly and endlessly. Boom! The void burst and collapsed. As soon as Bai Longting made his move, his domineering combat power shocked everyone and caused exclamations. Lin Sun looked calm. Instead of retreating, he moved forward. Around him, the way of star obliteration was running. In a trance, his figure seemed to turn into a big abyss. It was so big and boundless. How could he just rush over like that? Many people were stunned. You are courting death. Bai Longting sneered in his heart. The power of his wheel of 5 elements was endless. It was a fatal attack. Even the top cultivators of his generation had to resist it with all their strength. But Lin Sun just rushed over like that. He was courting death. But when they collided together, Bai Longting felt as if his divine wheel of 5 elements had sunk into a swamp. Layers of terrifying destructive power spun madly, causing his divine wheel of 5 elements to suddenly come to a halt. No matter how hard he tried, he could not break free from the terrifying power of the Great Path. This, Bai Longting's face changed slightly. At the same time, Lin Sun's figure suddenly stretched out. With a rumble, the great abyss suddenly expanded, directly crushing the divine wheel of 5 elements inch by inch. The light rain and power of its collapse were all annihilated. From afar, it looked as if it had been swallowed whole. The onlookers were dumbfounded. The force of the figure's charge had destroyed Bai Longting's terrifying attack? At the same time, Bai Longting let out a muffled groan while his vital energy and blood roiled. His ultimate attack had been destroyed just like that, so his body couldn't help but sway and suffer the backlash. But before he could react, Lin Sun had already rushed to him and punched him. Boom! The air was like boiling water. With a loud sound, an ancient and brilliant fist force appeared out of nowhere. This punch contained the glow of the Tao within it, and its might covered the heavens and the earth. It pressed down upon this expanse of the heavens and the earth to the point of collapsing and rumbling uncontrollably. Many experts held their breaths, not daring to imagine how terrifying this attack was, because this fist had reached the divine realm. Seal of 5 elements, break. Bai Longting's face also became extremely solemn, which was rare for him. His body seemed to be burning, and the 5 forces of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth gathered together and turned into a big seal, which rose from the void like a holy mountain. Boom! The earth-shattering collision sounded. At the place where the two collided, the terrible torrent of Tao light swept across the universe. Many experts couldn't dodge in time and staggered back, coughing up blood. From this, it could be seen how terrifying this battle was. The next moment, Bai Longting's figure staggered back more than 10 steps in the void. Every step he took, a hole appeared in the void. When he stabilized his body, his face had become pale, and he couldn't help coughing up blood. Lin Sun, on the other hand, was tall and handsome, with the momentum of a devil. This caused everyone present to be shocked. Before, as soon as Bai Longting appeared, everyone was full of expectations, thinking that he could compete with Lin Sun. But who would have thought that in just the first confrontation, Lin Sun defeated Bai Longting with irresistible force. Lin Sun even made him cough up blood. With such a comparison, how powerful was Fiend God Lin's current combat strength? Many people's hearts were trembling. I'm arrogant because you don't know what real power is. Lin Sun didn't stop after he succeeded. He stepped into the void and rushed to Bai Longting. Boom! But at this moment, a cyan spear suddenly rushed out of the void, like a ray of light, and stabbed at Lin Sun at an incredible speed. The one holding the cyan spear was Ming Child. Covered in armor, he was exuding monstrous, killing intent. Once he made a move, it was a thunderous blow. Fast. It was too fast. No one expected that such a famous figure as Ming Child would choose to launch a sneak attack, which caught people off guard. Clang! With a roar and sparks flying, an old blood-stained shield appeared behind Lin Sun and blocked the spear narrowly. Damn it! My Zhou 6 shields. Ming Child's face darkened and he was furious. Last time, He was killed by Lin Sun and escaped with only a remnant of his soul. At the same time, he lost two treasures. One was the sealed primordial killer sword. The other was this old blood-soaked shield, and its name was the 6 Imperial Cycles. It was also an extraordinary ancient treasure. However, Ming Child didn't expect that he would be blocked by his own treasure at the perfect moment to attack Lin Sun. This made him so angry that he almost coughed up blood. From beginning to end, Lin Sun didn't look back at all, nor did he pay attention to Ming Child. His spiritual awareness locked on Bai Longting, and he had already rushed to him. Boom! Although Bai Longting tried his best to resist, he was still beaten to dodge frequently. He was so uncomfortable that he almost coughed up blood, and his body was trembling. He felt as if he was fighting against a towering mountain, and his strength was completely suppressed. This made his face change. For the first time, he realized that he had underestimated the horror of this opponent. As the rumor said, only by fighting with Demon Lin in person could one understand how small and insignificant he was. Bai Longting didn't believe it before. Now, he had to believe it. Pooh! After another heavy punch, Bai Longting's entire body was blasted flying while blood sprayed from his mouth and nose, and it caused everyone to exclaim in shock. Kill! Ming Child charged over once more. The dark green spear in his hand shook, and it gave rise to a myriad of storms that rumbled as they swept out and tore space into pieces. At practically the exact same moment, a few more ferocious figures of similar cultivation moved out from other directions. Because they discerned that it was utterly impossible for Bai Longting to suppress Demon Lin's flames by himself, and they had to attack together. Bang! A peerlessly dazzling strand of sword insight that shot into the sky flashed out. Gu Tianyi, who wore an azure robe, attacked, and his killing intent shot into the sky while the scene of a mountain of corpses and an ocean of blood appeared. A whip that was graceful like a crimson dragon flashed out, and it emanated a gorgeous and pure rain of petals. It was held in the hands of a slender, graceful woman that was completely golden in color. A snow-white saber soared through the sky while emanating surging and muddy blood-colored saber chi. It was like a beacon of fire, overbearing, bloody, and filled with slaughter. This was a black-robed man with hair that was like a halberd, and his saber intent surged violently. For a time, the situation was completely chaotic. All sorts of Taoist techniques, Taoist light, and treasures crisscrossed, and they emanated magnificent and brilliant light that illuminated the world. All of these attacks were aimed at Lin Sun alone. The scene was simply earth-shattering, and it was sufficient to make anyone feel despair and helpless. On the other hand, Lin Sun's originally ferocious and vigorous aura of slaughter had suffered from stagnation, and he was trapped in that part of the world while fighting enemies from all directions. His situation had become passive. Bai Longting isn't a match for you, but when many ferocious figures like Bai Longting attack together, how can you resist them? In the distance, the light in Qi Yao's eyes flickered as she gazed at Lin Sun, who was trapped, and she felt a wave of emotion in her heart. If it was a one-on-one battle, she dared to confirm that there was probably no one present who could go against Lin Sun. But the crux of the matter was that no one would be stupid enough to fight Lin Sun one-on-one at a time like this. It's too difficult for a single person to turn the tide. Qi Yao was struggling in her heart, and she was considering whether she should attack as well. Compared to Alu's good fortune, she actually valued the piece of Bodhi wood in Lin Sun's hands more. If she could take advantage of this opportunity to obtain it, it would definitely be more valuable to her than obtaining a great fortune. Lin Sun, it's difficult for 2 fists to defeat 4 hands. No matter how strong your combat power is, you're still going to die this time, aren't you? In the midst of the fierce battle, Bai Longting had already regained his composure, and his eyes were bone-chilling. This time, no matter what, he had to kill Lin Sun. Lin Sun's strength made Bai Longting feel an indescribably serious threat. If Lin Sun was allowed to live, he was destined to be unable to eat or sleep in peace in the future. Kill! Ming Child's expression was grim, and his killing intent was wild. He was in a state of extreme excitement. At the moment, Lin Sun was alone and completely besieged. There were at least 8 or 9 overlords attacking him at the same time. There was no suspense in this battle. He, Lin Sun, must be killed. Taoism fellow Lin, if you die, don't blame us for being ruthless. This is the struggle for the Great Way, and there is no room for mercy or mercy. You've blocked our way to snatch the fortune, so you can only die. Haha, if you die in our hands, you can preserve your prestige when you're alive. In the fierce battle, the others also spoke one after another. Everyone looked indifferent, and their attacks were not polite. No one was willing to give Lin Sun any chance to escape. Lin Sun's strength not only made Bai Longting feel a serious threat, but also made them feel frightened, and had a strong killing intent. From the beginning to the end, Lin Sun's expression was still calm. His black eyes were deep and cold, and there was not a trace of emotion on his face. Although he was a little embarrassed after being besieged, and his body was inevitably stained with a lot of blood and scars, he didn't suffer any serious injuries. Now listening to the cold and indifferent voices of the others, Lin Sun couldn't help but sneer in his heart, as if they were sentencing him to death. He didn't say anything more, and he didn't want to say a word more. He was waiting. He was waiting for all the fierce people hiding in the dark to jump out. At that time, he would give everyone a surprise, and it depended on whether they could bear it or not. Chapter 1309. Demon Lin was doomed. In the distance, all the heroes were shocked and agitated. In this battle, Lin Sun was so powerful that Bai Longting couldn't even raise his head. But now, the situation had completely changed. Bai Longting was not the only one who attacked Lin Sun. There were many others at the same level. Lin Sun was besieged at once. He was like a trapped beast. This is the general trend. Lin Sun wants to save Bai Longting alone. It's no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Some people were excited and wanted Lin Sun to be killed. Don't you think it's a great fortune to have a friend like Lin Sun? If it weren't for saving his friend, how could Lin Sun be in such a predicament? Some people sighed and were moved by Lin Sun's actions. Qi Yao heard these comments and looked at the figure in the distance who was still fighting in the siege. She struggled more and more in her heart. Should she take action or not? This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to kill Lin Sun. Big brother! Under the heavenly tribulation, Alu's eyes were wide open and his pupils were red and bloodshot. He was at the critical moment of the tribulation. But how could he remain indifferent when he saw Lin Sun's situation? There was an instant where he wished for nothing more than to abandon everything and charge forward with all his might to take his enemies down with him. Hearing Alu's roar, Lin Sun's heart suddenly trembled. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. Otherwise, Alu would inevitably be disturbed and probably fail to pass the tribulation. Alu, concentrate on the tribulation. A group of chickens and dogs can't do anything to your big brother. Lin Sun took a deep breath and said in a low voice. The moment he said that, it was met with a sneer. He was already in a hopeless situation, yet he was consoling someone who was about to fail his tribulation. Was Fiend Celestial Lin crazy? Big brother, I believe you. In the sky, Alu surprisingly calmed down and let out a roar. He no longer looked at the battle in the distance and focused all his attention on the tribulation. Deep in his heart, there was an unprecedented desire and determination. He must pass the tribulation successfully, no matter what. If Lin Sun was in trouble this time, he swore that he would slaughter all his enemies and bury them with their blood and lives. This sort of yearning was so firm and strong that it caused Alu to fall into an extremely frenzied yet extremely calm state of mind. Humph! Putting on a show of brotherly love, it's disgusting. In battle, Underworld Child sneered, not hiding his ridicule at all. The expressions of the others were also indifferent and cold beyond compare. This was a dead end. No matter who came, they would not be able to resolve it. Lin Sun, give up struggling. This time, no one can save you. I respect you as a real overmatch, so I can let you die with dignity. Bai Longting said coldly. If I want to live, why do I need others to save me? At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly raised his head, and a cold, killing intent flashed in his deep eyes. I told you, you are just a group of chickens and dogs. His voice was like a clap of thunder, actually covering the sound of the heavenly tribulation, surging through the 9 heavens and 10 earths. At the same time, an unprecedented horrible aura erupted from Lin Sun like a volcano that had been accumulating power for a long time. Not good. This, Bai Longting, Underworld Child, and others who were besieging Lin Sun all changed their expressions. They all noticed that the aura emitted from Lin Sun was much stronger than before. Go to hell. At the same time, Lin Sun, who had been in a passive position, suddenly punched out. Boom. The void turned upside down, and all things collapsed. A blazing fist force seemed to break the shackles of time and space. Just the aura emitted from it made the world tremble. Ah! With a shrill scream, the black-clothed man holding the snow-white saber was completely covered by the fist force. Starting from his head, neck, back, legs, and so on, inch by inch, his flesh and blood were flying all over the sky. The force of the punch was peerlessly ferocious, and it was released to its limits, causing the space there to collapse into an enormous gorge. The whole area was in dead silence. Everyone was dumbfounded, looking at all of this, dumbfounded. Before, they clearly saw that Lin Sun was besieged, suppressed, and about to die in the field. But now, everything seemed to be reversed. This punch not only killed the strong enemy, but also tore the iron curtain that besieged Lin Sun. Even fierce people like Bai Longting and Underworld Child were shocked, and almost couldn't believe it. Had Lin Sun been hiding his strength before? Go to hell. Although it seemed slow, it actually happened extremely fast. After killing the black-clothed man, Lin Sun completely released himself like a long-dormant dragon coming out of the abyss. Boom! Another punch flashed out, and it pressed down on the graceful woman who held the scarlet dragon whip in her hand. Open! The woman screamed. Golden Taoist light surged all over her body, and she fought with all her strength. But under Lin Sun's punch, the long whip in her hand burst like a piece of paper, and then the battle suit covering her body was also smashed. Her whole chest collapsed, and a bloody hole was punched out by the blazing fist force. One punch pierced through her chest. The woman's eyes were wide open before she died, with a look of confusion and disbelief. Then, her figure exploded, and she died. It was so terrifying that the whole audience was silent and trembling. From the moment Lin Sun launched a counterattack, only 2 punches had killed 2 peerless figures who had stepped into the 6th retribution of longevity. His overwhelming combat power could shock even ghosts and gods. It was incredible. Before this, no one could think of it. They all thought that no one could help Lin Sun out of his predicament. But now, no one came to save him. He broke out of the predicament himself and killed his way out of death with 1 punch. We've all been fooled. Bai Longting was furious, and his whole body was cold. Before, Lin Sun could suppress him without any resistance when he held back his strength. Now that Lin Sun counterattacked with all his strength, who could be his opponent? Damn it! Underworld Child also roared. But now, it was impossible for them to back down. They were in the middle of the battle, and they couldn't pull themselves out even if they wanted to. Kill, let's go together. Someone shouted, calling on other strong people to attack Lin Sun together with the tactic of overwhelming numbers. However, at this moment, Lin Sun had already made up his mind to kill the enemy. He no longer waited and endured, so how could he be afraid of this? Kill! His black hair fluttered, and his figure moved horizontally in the field like a big abyss. The killing intent in his heart spread out like a landslide and a tsunami. The anger of Yazi, the battle saint technique, the everlasting leakless, all kinds of Taoism and Dharma were performed by him with all his strength. Puff, puff, puff. Under this kind of killing, the strong people in the field died one after another. Or they were killed by the blazing fist energy. Or they were crushed by the great divination finger. Or they were erased by the power of the 9 transformations of Calamity Dragon. Or, for a moment, in the void, blood rained like a waterfall, broken corpses flew everywhere, and screams, wails, and roars resounded incessantly. This was an incomparably bloody scene, and Lin Sun, who was rushing into it, was like a painter. With a wave of his hand, he created a sad and beautiful scene of the dead. In the distance, Qi Yao's hands and feet were cold, and her face was pale. The struggle in her heart had long been replaced by this bloody scene, and it was replaced by an indescribable chill. Her eyes were in a trance, and her vision was full of the color of blood. It was so dazzling. One by one, the strong people fell there like a piece of paper, like fireworks blooming in an instant. After the brilliance, everything returned to silence. Only that figure, like a demon god standing between heaven and earth since ancient times, seemed to be eternal. His divine power was irresistible, and his killing intent shocked the heavens. Surging tribulation lightning flickered in the horizon. Under the illumination of the dazzling lightning, that figure bathed in blood and slaughter was so overbearing, arrogant, and callous that it caused others to feel despair. Wrong, all wrong. From the beginning, they were already not on the same level as him. Qi Yao was lost. Qi Yao was in a daze. She didn't know whether to rejoice or be disappointed. Retreat. In the field, Bai Longting shouted. Lin Sun's combat power made him feel completely frightened and stimulated, and he did not hesitate to start fleeing. Unfortunately, it was too late. When Qi Yao raised her head, she happened to see a snow-white sharp light flashing through the air at an incredible speed. Then, Bai Longting, an ancient freak who ranked in the top 10 of the Tianjiao Golden List and had long been famous in the upper 9 realms, was cut in half, and both his body and soul were destroyed. Qi Yao shivered all over, as if she had fallen into an ice cave. "Miss Qi Yao, save me!" Suddenly, a scream full of despair sounded. It was Gu Tianyi, dressed in a green robe. Before, he was elegant and disdainful of Lin Sun, but now, he was panicking like a dog. His hair was disheveled, his face was blue, and his face was full of fear. Qi Yao was just about to speak when she felt a cold and indifferent gaze sweep over her. The gaze was as deep as a bottomless abyss, as if it could swallow people's souls. In an instant, Qi Yao's whole body stiffened, and her mind went blank. Then, in her vision, all the bones in Gu Tianyi's body were broken. Blood and bone fragments flew together, and he died violently in the void. "Still want to escape?" Suddenly, Lin Sun's cold voice sounded between heaven and earth. She saw Ming Child's hair was disheveled, and he turned into a ray of light, fleeing far away, exactly the same as when he fled last time. Puff! The broken blade swept out and cut off one of Ming Child's arms. It was also at this moment that the god smelting pot appeared again, spinning in the air, sprinkling a magnificent rain of light that enveloped Ming Child's broken body. Clang! The broken blade chopped down, and the god smelting pot merely shook. However, the terrifying power released by the broken blade had forcefully shattered the dark child's body that was already in a terrible state. "I'm not willing, I'm not willing!" Ming Child let out an incomparably mournful scream, and then his voice disappeared. This ancient freak born in the upper 9 realms was born with great luck and grasped all kinds of great creation. But now, before he could leave the absolute domain, he was killed. Buzz the god-smelting pot made a strange buzzing sound, wrapped up Ming Child's broken body, and flew away, disappearing in an instant. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. He was sure that Ming Child's body and soul had been destroyed, but he couldn't guarantee that the god-smelting pot could save Ming Child again. But this was no longer important. The top priority was to kill the enemy. Chapter 13:10 From the beginning of Lin Sun's counterattack, the situation of the battle had changed dramatically in just a moment. Bai Longting was killed, Ming Child's body and soul were destroyed. The overlords of the upper 9 realms were killed one after another. That bloody scene caused everyone's souls to leave their bodies. Clatter, blood was still splashing in the void. The dazzling light of the tribulation thunder made Lin Sun's tall and straight figure look bright. In the battlefield, his black hair was flying in the air. He was alone, but he was like the master of heaven and earth. When he waved his fist, he could stir up the world. He was really invincible. Just looking at him from a distance made people feel desperate and insignificant. Many of the experts who died in his hands were leaders of forces, and they were ranked at the top of the Heaven's Pride Golden ranking. But in front of Lin Sun, they were no different from chickens and dogs. In this way, how powerful was Lin Sun's combat power now? No one knew when the heroes in the field began to disperse. They chose to save and retreat. No one dared to rush into the battle like before. It seemed that the place where Lin Sun was a bloody hell, enough to bury anyone's soul. At this moment, everyone could see that the situation was hopeless. No one could suppress Devil Lin's ferocity. Before, although the heroes in the field were afraid of Lin Sun, they all thought that Lin Sun was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot or an egg hitting a stone. It was no different from courting death. But now everything was reversed. With the death of Bai Longting, Ming Child and other overlords, Lin Sun fought his way out of death alone, overturning the sky with one hand. This was something that no one could have predicted before. Boom! In the field, a strong man's body burst into pieces. At this point, there were no more enemies around Lin Sun. The surroundings were deathly silent. As they gazed at the tall figure that stood in space and was bathed in dazzling light of the Tao, every single one of them felt unprecedented terror. Was such a monster still a human being? Looking at the whole upper 9 realms, who could suppress him? Who else is not convinced? Come here. The pungent smell of blood permeated the air. The earth was full of scars and broken bodies. Lin Sun stood in the void. His voice was not loud, but it made everyone stiff. His eyes were like cold lightning, deep like an abyss as he swept his gaze across the audience. Everyone subconsciously lowered their heads, not daring to meet his gaze. This was the power of killing. The deterrence created by bones and blood was always more persuasive than words. The atmosphere became even more deathly silent, and only Lin Sun's flat and cold voice reverberated in the air, causing many people to have the impulse to flee. At that moment, the tribulation clouds in the sky dispersed, and the thunder fell silent. Alu's 6th longevity tribulation was over. Lin Sun turned his head abruptly and saw Alu, whose body was almost broken, shrouded in layers of lightning. "Big brother, I did it!" The rims of Alu's eyes reddened. This barbarian was extremely boorish and had a carefree personality. At this moment, there was a hint of choking in his voice, which was very moving. Lin Sun's heart was also fluctuating. This time, if he hadn't arrived in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. "Rest well," Lin Sun warned. Clang! However, at that moment, a platinum-like halberd swept out of the void and rushed toward Alu from one side. This was an extremely valiant, domineering, and ferocious young man. He had a head of white hair, and his eyes were suffused with a gorgeous golden glow. As his eyes swept over the surroundings, the bloody scene of hell appeared within them. The halberd in his hand was also extremely amazing, as if it was made of white divine gold. Its blade was as sharp as lightning and was branded with mysterious Taoist patterns. The murderous intent it released was so strong that it darkened the world. This was an extremely terrible master. He was even more powerful than Bai Longting, Ming Child, and others. Exclamations sounded in the field. Before, Lin Sun had conquered all the heroes, and no one dared to attack him. When Alu succeeded in passing the tribulation, everyone thought that the battle would come to an end. Who could have thought that such a shocking change would happen at such a moment? Moreover, the timing of the attack was extremely precise. He seized the moment when Alu was in a weak state after passing the tribulation. Obviously, he had been planning this for a long time. "You're courting death," Lin Sun snorted coldly. His black eyes were full of killing intent, but he was not in a hurry. As early as the beginning of the battle, he had expected this. At that time, when he was besieged by Longting, Ming Child, and others, the reason why he chose to be patient and reserved was that he wanted to wait for the fierce guys hiding in the dark to jump out and then kill them all. Unfortunately, Lin Sun launched a counterattack in advance because he didn't want to distract Alu. But this was not important. What was important was that Lin Sun was not caught off guard by this sudden attack. Clang! A deafening collision sound rang out, and a dazzling golden copper coin swept out, blocking the white-haired man's attack at the critical moment. "Trash, do you only know how to sneak attack?" Old Toad in a green robe, who was as handsome as a young man, swept out with a disdainful look. Above him was a copper coin that was round on the outside and square on the inside. It had a pair of golden wings on both sides, and there were obscure and strange markings of the Tao within it. It revolved as it floated there, and it was like a small sun. Treasure-suppressing copper coin. Humph! The white-haired young man frowned, obviously a little surprised. But he was extremely fierce. Since his attack failed, he rushed again with the halberd. Boom! The platinum halberd swept across the sky, shattering heaven and earth. Vaguely, the crowd seemed to see a white tiger roaring proudly in the universe, pouncing out of the void. The tiger's roar shattered the sun, moon, and stars. Who is he? In the field, the crowd's expressions changed. This white-haired young man was simply too powerful. His chi and blood were monstrous and fierce like the sea, making them feel extremely oppressed. But what made people's hearts palpitate was that almost no one knew this person's origin. "I'm sure he's not one of the top 100 on the Tianjiao Golden List," someone said with certainty. Boom! In the field, the battle broke out. The white-haired man and Old Toad fought fiercely. One swept the platinum halberd with monstrous killing intent, the other swallowed the sun and spat out the moon, suppressing the enemy with the copper coin. The battle was extremely fierce. Lin Sun couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Old Toad had obtained the impartation of burning immortals and was an extremely terrifying ancient freak himself. In these years, he had made rapid progress. In terms of advancement speed, Old Toad had entered the 6th retribution of immortality half a year earlier than Lin Sun. In terms of true combat strength, Old Toad wasn't inferior to overlords like Bai Longting and the Dark Child. But now, in the battle with the white-haired man, Old Toad couldn't gain the slightest advantage. "I didn't expect him to be a descendant of the White Tiger." Suddenly, Old Toad sneered, but his expression was extremely solemn, which was rare for him. White tigers were masters of slaughter. In ancient times they were already infamous. They had the ability to kill gods and slay saints, and were boundlessly terrifying. Like the true dragon, the immortal phoenix, and the vermilion bird, this race was like a legend, only appearing in the beginning of ancient times. For a moment there were countless exclamations in the field, and the crowd was shocked. No one had expected that this white-haired man would be related to such a terrifying race. However, why had such a ruthless person, who could shock the world, been unknown all these years? Whoosh! In the midst of the battle, the big black bird suddenly appeared like a ghost. Holding the big black wok, it smashed it fiercely towards the white-haired man from behind. The swiftness of his speed and the decisiveness of his actions caused others to be flabbergasted. This sort of exceedingly skilled staggering blow technique was simply at the peak of perfection. "What's the hurry? Your opponent is me." Suddenly, a feminine voice resounded, and a black shadow wriggled in the void. Suddenly, it transformed into a thin man. This person had purple hair, blood-red eyes, and a silver robe. His figure was like an illusory bolt of lightning, flickering indeterminately and giving off an illusory feeling. The most terrifying thing was that his speed was extremely fast. As soon as he flashed out, he blocked the big black bird's path and struck out with his palm. Boom! The two collided. Caught off guard, the big black bird was pushed back. Flapping its wings, it went mad from embarrassment and pounced towards the purple-haired, blood-red-eyed young man. Whoosh! Whoosh! The big black bird's speed was already fast enough, but the purple-haired, blood-red-eyed young man's speed was actually not inferior to it. With a burst of crackling sounds, his figure flickered incredibly fast like a bolt of lightning. The confrontation between the two was simply a battle of speed. Chasing the sun and lightning, flashing and shifting, they competed between heaven and earth. Many strong practitioners couldn't see clearly with their eyes, and their divine awareness couldn't lock on the two figures. They couldn't help but be shocked. They had heard of the big black bird, but they felt extremely strange about the purple-haired, blood-red-eyed young man. Who was this person? It was certain that this person, like the white-haired young man, was not famous before, and had never been on the Tianjiao Golden List. But there was no doubt that his combat power was extremely terrible. The appearance of the purple-haired, blood-red-eyed young man was like another change, which made Lin Sun frown. Even he didn't expect that there would be such ruthless people in the dark one after another. And there was more than one. So, in addition to the white-haired man and the purple-haired young man, were there any similar characters in the dark? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold, glancing around. Crack! Suddenly, near Alu, the void suddenly broke, and a figure staggered back, screaming in surprise. Spirit-eating insect! Why does it still exist in the world? The figure was a little girl who looked like carved jade, dressed in a red dress. She looked extremely childish and pretty, but when her eyes moved, she gave people a mature and charming aura of having experienced the world. However, she looked a little embarrassed at the moment. Obviously, she had suffered a hidden loss. Her pretty face was pale and full of surprise. Humph! Despicable thing, I've been on guard against you scoundrels for a long time. Near Alu, Little Silver's figure also appeared, with a cold face and sharp eyes. At this moment, everyone in the surroundings came to an understanding. That expert who seemed like a little girl had stealthily approached Alu with the intention of launching a sneak attack and killing him. But she went for wool and came home shorn, suffering a hidden loss. It turns out that demon god Lin has been on guard from the beginning of the battle. Otherwise, how could he resist so many unexpected sneak attacks? Someone murmured. Chapter 13:11. When the young man suspected to be the descendant of White Tiger suddenly appeared, no one expected it. After all, those who dared to do so at this time, unless they were not afraid of Lin Sun, were no different from courting death. On the other hand, when the violet-haired and blood-red-eyed man flashed out, everyone finally realized that this attack was actually premeditated, and it was closely linked to each other. Until the girl in red appeared and suffered a loss, everyone present was completely disappointed, because they could see that the real killing intent was not in the first two. This was obviously a well-prepared operation that no one dared to imagine. If Lin Sun hadn't taken precautions in advance, Alu was doomed to suffer. It's time to close the net. At this moment Lin Sun attacked. He had been watching coldly before, but now he decided to close the net and kill the fish. Boom! A punch, like a ray of light running through the universe, was incomparably blazing. In an instant, the white-haired young man who was fighting fiercely with Old Toad was forced to retreat. Clang! At the same time, the broken sword swept out and appeared in front of the young man with purple hair and red eyes at an incredible speed. It chopped down like a variable of the Great Way. Impermanence chop. The young man with purple hair let out a roar and suddenly fled far away. All the people present were shocked. As soon as Lin Sun attacked, he scared away two terrifying figures. The demeanor of demon god Lin was more and more frightening at this moment. But it was not over yet, As Lin Sun uttered a pu-lao roar, the grand sound turned into golden ripples and spread out. The girl in red was so shocked that she screamed and dodged. "Old toad, you protect Alu and leave these shameful things to me." Lin Sun looked cold and ordered casually. "You have to be careful. None of these three people are simple." Old Toad warned. "I suspect that they have helpers in the dark. Don't be careless." The big black bird also reminded Lin Sun by voice transmission. Lin Sun nodded and glanced around. Finally, his eyes fell on the white-haired young man and the other two who had already gathered together. The atmosphere was extremely gloomy and oppressive at this moment. "Fellow Taoism, Lin is worthy of the title of demon god. Your martial arts are amazing." The girl in red regained her composure and stood in the air. Her eyes were enchanting and her voice was soft and alluring. "He's indeed very powerful. If he joins us, he'll be able to add a great general to the Imperial Prince's team." At this moment, the white-haired man had restrained his killing intent, and his expression was calm and emotionless. Only his eyes revealed a sharp glow as if he was looking down upon all living beings. The purple-haired, red-eyed youth remained silent. His figure flickered, as if he would disappear at any moment. "Your sneak attack failed, so you're not going to continue? I don't have time to chat with you." Lin Sun looked indifferent, and his black eyes became colder. "Fellow Taoist Lin, are you not curious about our origins?" The red-dressed girl was taken aback. "What does it have to do with me who you are? In my eyes, all of you are already dead." Lin Sun looked calmer and calmer. Haven't you seen it yet? Lin Sun has already held a grudge against us. Even if you cherish talent for His Highness, it's impossible to pull him into our camp." The white-haired man's expression was indifferent. The red-clothed girl called you. She frowned and sighed lightly. "It seems to be the case. Yao Li, what do you say?" She looked at the purple-haired, red-eyed youth next to her. "Lin Sun, we're here for the good fortune of the Emperor's tomb. As long as you let your friend hand it over, we'll leave immediately." The purple-haired, red-eyed youth called Yao Li looked at Lin Sun with a flash of light in his eyes. "Otherwise, I'm afraid it's hard to let go of what happened today." His voice was sonorous and full of killing intent. "Ho ho!" Lin Sun's eyes were full of sarcasm. These three people either didn't recognize the situation, or they had something else to rely on, so they dared to treat him like this without fear. But it was useless in front of Lin Sun. "If you leave now, I'll let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, no matter who you are, I'll kill you all," Lin Sun said coldly with his hands behind his back. "You're courting death." The white-haired man's voice was cold, and he waved the platinum halberd in his hand. An earth-shattering killing intent suddenly tore the void and chopped at Lin Sun, like the ninth heaven god waving the spear of destruction. There was a sound of gasping in the field, and the faces of the crowd changed. The power of this blow made them feel oppressed as if there was a sword on their back. "You can't." Lin Sun's eyes were cold. He pressed his fingers together, and the surging spiritual power turned into a finger force, which was mighty like the spring and autumn of all ages. Bang! The earth-shattering killing intent was crushed inch by inch, and the remaining power of the finger force didn't diminish. It pressed the void of the world to collapse. The white-haired man in it also trembled violently, and a touch of surprise flashed in his eyes. "Break!" he shouted, and his killing intent soared to the sky. There was a faint sound of a tiger roaring in the galaxy. Boom! The terrible collision spread in the confrontation between the two. In the surprised voice of the crowd, the sleeves of the white-haired man burst like firecrackers. He staggered back a few steps before he managed to stop, but his face was already glowing with blue light with surprise. At the same time, Yushi and Yao Li also narrowed their eyes and looked solemn. They all knew how terrible the combat power of the white-haired man was, but he suffered a loss in the first confrontation. At the same time, Lin Sun was also a little surprised. This finger of his was powered by various secret techniques, and its might was so formidable that it was sufficient to easily crush an expert of the same cultivation. Yet now, it was merely able to lightly injure the white-haired man. This undoubtedly proved that the white-haired man was extremely powerful. "You also take a blow from me." Suddenly, Lin Sun punched out. Boom! The world was turned upside down, and the sun and moon were inverted. This punch had already reached the level of God, with a unique momentum, giving people a sense of unstoppable and unavoidable oppression and suffocation. Humph! The white-haired man's eyes were fierce, and his fighting intent and killing intent were entangled. He tried his best to drive the platinum halberd in his hand. Swish! A murderous aura that was even more terrifying than before flashed out. It faintly seemed like a white tiger was roaring within it, and its roar shattered the starry sky and was peerlessly terrifying. But at the instant it collided with the punch, all this might exploded like a bubble. Surging Tao light and divine radiance swept out, and it crushed open numerous horrifying rifts in the nearby space. "Damn it!" Amidst a furious cry of shock, the white-haired man was struck by the punch, and his body seemed as if it was out of his control as it smashed into the ground like a meteor. Even the ground shook violently. The expressions of everyone instantly changed, and they were perfectly silent while their hearts thumped violently. The white-haired man was sufficiently terrifying, but he was still no match for demonic god Lin in a head-on collision. Even Yu Shi and Yao Li's expressions changed slightly as they realized that they'd underestimated Lin Sun. The strength he revealed at this moment was clearly more terrifying than when he killed Bai Longting, the Dark Child, and the others. It was unbelievable, but they had no choice but to believe it. "Damn it!" With a furious roar, the white-haired man jumped up from the ground. His face was filled with murderous aura, and he was like a god of slaughter. "Stubborn. Then don't blame me for starting a massacre today." Lin Sun's eyes flashed with cold lightning. At this moment, an ethereal voice sounded in the field. "By gone, Yu Shi, Yao Li, let's stop here. It's time for us to go." Along with this voice, numerous petal-like glows of the Tao actually drifted down from the sky, and they emanated an aura that caused one's heart to become tranquil and peaceful. For a moment, all the heroes in the field were in a trance. The voice was like the sound of nature, which made people feel intoxicated just by listening to it. Lin Sun showed an expression of, as expected. He'd noticed something was wrong before because Yu Shi and the other two were too calm. Because of this, Lin Sun restrained his killing intent and had been observing quietly, not daring to be careless in the slightest. But at this moment, when the voice sounded, Lin Sun felt relaxed. He wasn't afraid of the enemy, but he was afraid that the enemy would hide in the dark and not come out. Yes. No matter if it was the furious white-haired man, Yu Shi or Yao Li, all of their expressions changed, and they agreed in unison. "Want to leave? Did I agree?" Right at this moment, Lin Sun erupted completely. An illusory ray of light that pierced through the heavens and the earth flashed out from him, and it slashed towards Yu Shi and the others in the distance. Impermanence slash. "Fellow Taoist Lin, why do this?" The ethereal voice that sounded like the sound of nature resounded once more. At the same time, a green flying sword that was 2 fingers wide and less than 7 inches long suddenly appeared before the broken blade. At the critical moment, this green flying sword spread out a completely round sword image in the sky, and it was illusory like the void as it revolved slowly. The might of the impermanence slash was extremely terrifying, yet it was dispersed by this sword image that revolved slowly, and deafening sounds of collision resounded between them. Some cultivators felt their eardrums almost shatter while the vital blood in their entire bodies roiled. Such a peerless collision was simply too terrifying. Humph! By gone, Yu Shi, Yao Li, and the others revealed disdainful expressions when they saw this scene. All of them were clearly aware what sort of legendary existence the owner of the green flying sword was. But unexpectedly, Lin Sun suddenly sneered when he suffered such an obstruction. "I've found you! Every single word he spoke was like a thunderclap. After that, a peerless strand of sword intent suddenly flashed out from Lin Sun. At that instant, the heavens and the earth seemed to have dimmed down, and only a strand of peerlessly dazzling sword chi remained in the world. This sword strike was called gone without return. At this moment, everyone in the surroundings had a feeling of terror, as if the blade of a sword was pressed against their throats, and their scalps went numb while their souls almost left their bodies. This sword chi was truly too terrifying. Swoosh! As soon as the sword chi appeared, it vanished in a flash. At the same time, at the peak of a verdant mountain 50 kilometers away, a graceful figure was sitting cross-legged under an old tree and drinking tea. But at this instant, her slender fingers suddenly stiffened, and the tea in her cup suddenly spilled. In the next moment, her entire body tore through the sky. Bang! The verdant mountain beneath her feet was slashed into two, and a gorge that was perfectly straight like a ruler had been split open on the ground, and it stretched extremely far into the distance. This sword chi is extraordinary. A murmur resounded in the sky while a strand of scarlet-red blood appeared on the tip of the right index finger of the beautiful figure. Chapter 13:12. At the same time, Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. He had been preparing this sword for a long time. Although he couldn't exert it with all his strength, it was powerful enough to shake the top figures in the seventh retribution of longevity. But in his perception, the slender and graceful figure was just injured. Bang! In the distance, Duan Ren's attack was completely disintegrated. The cyan flying sword made a clear sound and broke through the air. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yu Shi, Bai Gan, and Yao Li had already broken through the air without any hesitation. Lin Sun wanted to chase after them, but he sighed in his heart and finally gave up after glancing at Alu, who was recovering. In fact, there was no regret, because he knew that the opportunity had been lost. Even if he chased after Alu, it was doomed to be in vain. Old Toad, clean up the battlefield. It's time for us to leave. Lin Sun glanced at the battlefield. All the heroes present were silent and didn't dare to look into his eyes. The previous scenes were so bloody and shocking that they hadn't come to their senses yet. When facing Lin Sun, they had no courage to resist at all except for fear. Let's go. Before long, Old Toad, Big Blackbird, and Alu, who had cleaned up the spoils, gathered together and left this bloody place with Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't want to gamble anymore because he didn't know what would happen if he didn't leave now. He had achieved his goal of rescuing Alu safely this time. With the departure of Lin Sun and his companions, the originally oppressive atmosphere also dissipated. All the heroes breathed a long sigh of relief, as if they had been relieved of a heavy burden. But there was still shock in their minds that couldn't be dispelled for a long time. Just how powerful is demonic god Lin? Someone murmured. Previously, all the heroes gathered together like an army. They regarded Alu as a beast in a cage that could be taken and slaughtered at any time. What's more, there were Mingzi and Bai Longting, who were famous in the upper 9 realms. But who could have thought that all these forces were torn apart by Lin Sun alone, killing overlords and spilling blood all over the world? Including Bai Longting, a total of 19 peerless overlords on the Heaven's Pride Gold leaderboard were killed. Apart from that, there are 32 peerless figures who died in the battle. Someone did the statistics, and the results were shocking. It should be known that in the entire upper 9 realms, there were countless peerless figures, but only 100 people could be ranked on the Heaven's chosen golden list. But now, as many as 19 overlords had died in Lin Sun's hands after the battle. There was no doubt that if this news were to spread, the entire upper 9 realms was bound to be shaken and set off a monstrous storm. Fortunately, we did not get involved. Many people rejoiced in their hearts, and they couldn't help but break out in cold sweat when they recalled the scenes from before. If they charged into the battle at that time and joined the camp that attacked Fiend Godlin, then they would probably have transformed into a pool of blood and remains on the ground now, right? Don't you think that the three people who appeared later are not simple? It's very likely that they're from the same camp, and they serve the same imperial prince. Some were surprised and bewildered, and they analyzed the origins of Yushi, Baigon, Yao Li, and the others. That's right, each of them is no weaker than Bai Longting, but they've been unknown for many years. This in itself is incredible. Perhaps the most terrifying thing is that imperial prince. To be able to recruit such a group of ruthless people as his subordinates, it's obvious that this imperial prince is not a simple person. The crowd discussed, and their hearts were in turmoil. In fact, no matter who they are, this attack was ultimately unable to do anything to Fiend God Lin. This is what makes Fiend God Lin so terrifying. Someone sighed. Only Qi Yao remained silent. Her heart was filled with bitterness and frustration. When she left the burning celestial realm, she had secretly vowed that she would never fight Lin Sun for the Bodhi Wood until she stepped into the Extinction King realm. But who would have thought that even in the Extinction King realm, she was no match for Lin Sun the Bodhi Wood? Why did he get it? Qi Yao's heart became gloomy. She turned and left like a walking corpse. In the past, she was also conceited and arrogant, thinking that she could rise in the great world, surpass all her peers, and set off a storm. But now, she realized that her thoughts were slightly childish. In the current generation, the existence of a ruthless person like Fiend God Lin was sufficient to suppress most ancient freaks to the point they couldn't even raise their heads. Miss Wanyin, are you injured? At the same time, the figures of Yushi, Baigon, and Yao Li appeared in an area that was covered in lightning. When they saw the graceful figure quietly waiting there, the three of them couldn't help but be startled. It was a woman that was like a fairy. She had a divine bearing, and her bearing was ethereal. Her entire body was bathed in a hazy mist, and she looked illusory. Upon closer inspection, she looked extremely young, like she was 17 or 18 years old. But as she stood there casually, she had a peerless charm that was untainted by the world. However, her face was slightly pale, and the front of her clothes was stained with a few scarlet-red bloodstains. Moreover, there was a drop of blood on the tip of her slender and fair right hand that was on the verge of flowing down. How could Yu Shi and the others not be shocked? This Miss Wanyin before them was the personal maidservant of the imperial prince. She had always been by the imperial prince's side since the ancient times when the imperial prince was still in seclusion. Although she was a maidservant, no one dared to treat her as a servant. The reason was very simple. Wanyin's talent, root, and foundation were all the best in the world. She was not inferior to any ancient freak. The most terrible thing was that she was also born with a unique talent, which enabled her to advance triumphantly on the road of cultivation. It was enough to make countless heroes admit their inferiority. Even the imperial prince once sighed that it was undoubtedly a disgrace to let Wanyin follow and serve him. It could be seen how much the imperial prince valued her. But now this fairy-like existence, who could look down on everyone else, was injured. All of a sudden, Yu Shi and the others thought of the sword that Lin Sun had slashed out. They couldn't help but feel a little cold in their hearts. The power of this sword was strong enough to injure Miss Wanyin? What do you think of Lin Sun's combat strength? At this moment, Wanyin suddenly spoke. Her voice was like the sound of nature, ethereal, and the aura between heaven and earth seemed to become lively and full of vitality. Very strong. This was the unanimous opinion of Yu Shi and the others. Even if they were unwilling, they had to admit that if it weren't for the fact that Wanyin was secretly guarding them, they wouldn't dare to offend Lin Sun easily. Lin Sun was like an unfathomable abyss that couldn't be measured by common sense. Wanyin nodded. She seemed to be thinking about something. By the way, Lin Sun was accompanied by a spirit-eating bug king. We must report this matter to the imperial prince. Yu Shi suddenly said with a trace of unwillingness on her face. At that time, if it weren't for the spirit-eating bug king, she would have killed Alu with the method of soul attack and seized the fortune of the emperor's tomb. Spirit-eating bug Wanyin's eyes became erratic, as if she was thinking of many things in the past. After a while, she said, "We really need to report this matter to the Imperial Prince immediately." In a few days, the Upper Nine regions was completely shocked. After 2 years, Demon Lin left the Buddha land and fought alone against enemies from all directions. He killed a way of life and death in the ancient land of Wanxiang and killed overlords in succession. This news pushed Lin Sun's momentum to an unprecedented height, causing a lot of discussion and uproar. Lin Sun alone killed 19 overlords on the Tianjiao Golden List. He is simply a killer. Some people were trembling. With his current combat capability, it shouldn't be difficult for him to rank in the top 3 on the Tianjiao Golden List, right? Some people were also analyzing and comparing Lin Sun's combat capability. Where is Yun Bai? Why hasn't he shown up yet? Is he going to watch Lin Sun develop into an invincible momentum? Some people who were hostile to Lin Sun were very indignant and subconsciously hoped that someone could stand up and suppress Lin Sun's arrogance. And these people had high hopes for Yun Bai. Because now it was clear that no matter whether the blood feud between Lin Sun and Yun Bai was true or not, at least it was true that Lin Sun had killed a group of successors of the Heaven-Reaching Sword sect. Unfortunately, in the past 2 years, Yun Bai seemed to have disappeared from the world, and there was no news of him. Even when he was pushed down from the first place on the Tianjiao Golden List, he didn't show up. At the same time, the origins of Yushi, Baigan, Yaoli, and others also attracted the attention of many forces in the dark. They were unknown before, and their names had never appeared on the Tianjiao Golden List, but they had the combat capability comparable to Bai Longting. Naturally, people couldn't ignore this. Who were they? And who was the person they regarded as the Imperial Prince? It was also now that many people suddenly realized that they could not only focus on the Tianjiao Golden List, nor could they judge heroes by the ranking on the Tianjiao Golden List. Because in the dark, there were still many extremely powerful figures who had not yet entered the Tianjiao Golden List. Such as Lin Sun. Such as Yushi, Baigan, and Yaoli, who were recently known by people. This made people speculate how many fierce figures there were in the Upper Nine Realms who had not been on the Tianjiao Golden List. Distant Fire Realm. When the passage to the Upper Nine Realms first opened, the Flying Star Mountain was occupied by the Golden Crow clan. But after a few years, Golden Crow had already withered and almost disappeared. Flying Star Mountain, which had experienced the destruction of war and smoke, had long become deserted and no longer had the atmosphere of a famous mountain. On this day, Lin Sun and his party appeared in front of Flying Star Mountain. I remember that there is an ancestral spiritual vein under this mountain. If we can find it and support it with the formation, it can be regarded as an excellent place for cultivation. Lin Sun looked up at the Flying Star Mountain, which had been deserted like ruins. He remembered that when he first set foot on the mountain, Golden Crow was still an overlord force with strong troops and horses, like the sun at high noon. But now, in just a few years, the former prosperity of Golden Crow had been blown away by the wind and rain. Imperial hegemony and ambition had all turned into nothingness. P.S. Today is Grandpa Goldfish's Memorial Day. All the family members have returned to their hometown, so we can only watch one night. Please understand. Chapter 13:13. Rise. Standing in the void, Lin Sun uttered a Taoist sound that shook the world. Buzz. On the desolate ruins of the Flying Star Mountain, a dense tide of Taoist inscriptions suddenly emerged and converged into a large formation to communicate with the power of heaven and earth. Visible to the naked eye, an unparalleled spiritual energy was awakened under the Flying Star Mountain like a dragon and then gushed out. The surging spiritual energy was like a great river, which turned into the shape of a dragon and a tiger, roaring between heaven and earth and shaking the mountains and rivers. On the Flying Star Mountain, plants grew crazily, and spiritual herbs and flowers bloomed in an instant, swaying in the wind, dazzling and dazzling. The gurgling spiritual energy turned into a waterfall, flying out from the dry and broken cliffs like a white dragon, pouring down. Even some withered roots buried deep in the ruins were rejuvenated and began to grow into towering trees. In just a moment, the flying star mountain had taken on a new look. Auspicious clouds gathered in the sky, rays of light flowed, and dreamy spiritual energy bathed the entire flying mountain. On the mountain, it was full of vitality, luxuriant plants, exotic flowers and herbs, waterfalls, springs, and gurgling streams. It was a thriving and blessed land. Compared with the desolate ruins before, the Flying Star Mountain at this moment could be called a famous mountain and blessed land. In the distance, Old Toad, Big Blackbird, and Alu were all stunned. Was this the power of a Taoist tattooist? Before, Lin Sun spent a day to set up a spiritual formation around the Flying Star Mountain in an attempt to restore it to its former appearance, and they didn't believe it. They thought that if they wanted to find a place to stay, they could directly seize a famous mountain and occupy it. There was no need to go through so much trouble. But now they all had to admit that at this moment they were amazed by Lin Sun's miraculous means of turning something rotten into something magical. A ruined land was revived in the blink of an eye. From today on, this place will be our residence for cultivation. Lin Sun descended from the sky and said slowly. As a matter of fact, it was not because he was exceptionally capable, but because there was an ancestral origin spiritual vein buried beneath the Flying Star Mountain, and he was merely using a Tao rune spiritual formation to trigger the power of the ancestral origin spiritual vein. Otherwise, no matter how capable he was, it would be impossible for him to create such a beautiful and magnificent paradise out of thin air. Of course, if he didn't possess strength that was close to the level of a Tao inscription master, it would be absolutely impossible for him to accomplish this. Previously, why was Flying Star Mountain so abandoned and unvisited? It was very simple. In the upper 9 realms, at least so far, only Lin Sun had the power of the Taoist tattoo spiritual formation to turn this rotten mountain into a magical one. Big brother, have you really made up your mind to meditate here for a period of time? Old Toad couldn't help asking. After rescuing Alu from the ancient land of Wanxiang, they left the thunder-shaking realm without stopping and returned to the distant fire realm. According to Lin Sun, he wanted to meditate, stay dormant for a period of time, and watch the outside world. Now, there is only about a year left before the end of the absolute peak domain. It can be foreseen that the upper 9 realms is bound to become more turbulent at the last moment. Although I am not afraid, I don't want to be involved in it and drift with the current. It is better to be a spectator. Lin Sun said casually. The Old Toad said, but as far as I know, there are still some places of heaven-defying good fortune in the upper 9 realms, such as the True Dragon Lair and the Weak Water Abyss. Are you willing to fight for them? Lin Sun's eyes were deep and he said calmly, on the road of Tao, I don't lack opportunities. What I lack is a precipitation. Precipitation. In the past few years, whether in the forbidden land of Blood River or in the Buddha land, he had repeatedly obtained good fortune and opportunities, and his cultivation had also advanced by leaps and bounds. Every once in a while there would be earth-shaking changes. The speed of his advancement was not shocking, but it was fast enough. Moreover, on the road of Tao, he didn't lack opportunities or good fortune at all. The only thing he lacked was a precipitation of prosperity. Opportunities were like external things. If he clung to them, he would be trapped by external things, which was tantamount to seeking fish from a tree and putting the cart before the horse. As he cultivated to the present realm, Lin Sun increasingly understood that cultivation was a process of cultivating the mind. If the mind was burdened by external things and internal feelings, even if he was a talented person, he was destined to fade into the crowd. In the final analysis, Lin Sun was very clear about what he needed and what he should give up on the road of Tao. The process of choosing and giving up was the process of conquering one's heart. Old Black, what about you? Seeing Lin Sun's firm attitude, the old toad couldn't help asking the big black bird. The big black bird sighed and put its wings on its back, saying, I'm tired, tired. I've seen through the prosperous world. Everything is like a dream. It's not better than getting drunk in the human world. I should retreat bravely and live in seclusion in the mountains and forests. When I'm sober, I can make wine and enjoy the flowers. When I'm drunk, I can make tea and discuss Tao. Isn't that great? The old toad and Alu rolled their eyes and spat in disdain. Alu, what do you say? The old toad turned its head and asked. Alu grinned. I've just got out of the coveted tomb of the emperor. Why should I ask for opportunities and good fortune? The old toad was so depressed that it almost coughed up blood. How could it forget that this barbarian had just got a great fortune? The big black bird's eyes suddenly lit up. Oh, why are we still thinking about good fortune? Isn't there a great fortune in front of us? It looked at Alu with a sneaky look, as if it was staring at a peerless beauty who was half naked. The word wretched was almost written on its forehead. The old toad was stunned at first, and then its body shook violently. It hugged Alu excitedly and cried, Third brother, did you get all the good fortune in the tomb? Alu's smile stiffened and he had a bad feeling in his heart. Just as he was about to leave, the big black bird and the old toad clamped his arms and took him up to Flying Star Mountain in an affectionate gesture that could not be refused. Tut tut, you're worthy of being my good third brother. Tell me, what are the mysteries hidden in the tomb of the emperor? Right, Alu, we even disregarded our lives to save you this time. Even though Grandpa Bird doesn't ask for anything else, you can repay Grandpa Bird with some fortuitous encounter if you feel bad. Bah! Didn't you just clamor that you've seen through the prosperity of the world and have no desires? You don't understand. I'm just discussing Tao with Brother Alu. Discuss your Tao. From a distance, only the voices of the old toad and the big black bird could be heard. Alu was like an outsider, with a blank face. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be speechless and then followed them. Right now, he had nothing to ask for in the upper 9 realms. He was just waiting for an opportunity to kill Yunqi Bai. When brothers meet again, they should drink. After several years, Lin Sun, the old toad and Alu finally reunited. At this moment, they could only drink to their heart's content to not waste such a good time. After drinking to his heart's content, Alu finally couldn't bear the hospitality of the old toad and the big black bird and told them everything he had experienced over the years. It turned out that when he was in the realm of immortals, Alu left alone and traveled to many realms. Finally, he got the news about the ancient land of Wanxiang. When the passage of the upper 9 realms opened, he planned to return to meet Lin Sun and the old toad, but he didn't have enough time, so he had to set off alone. After arriving in the upper 9 realms, Alu entered the thunder-shaking realm immediately. For outsiders, the seal of the ancient land of Wanxiang hadn't been removed, so no one could enter. But Alu was an exception, because the emperor's tomb, in the ancient land of Wanxiang, was left by the divine elephant martial emperor. And the supreme emperor suppression art that Alu cultivated was the inheritance of the ancient divine elephant martial emperor. Damn, you're so lucky! Hearing this, the old toad couldn't help but be envious. Save it. Didn't you get the inheritance of the burning immortals by yourself? Alu snorted coldly. Speaking of this, a touch of unspeakable grief and indignation suddenly appeared on his face. What's more, you have no idea how I've survived all these years. Saying this, he had the urge to burst into tears. It was true that there was good fortune left by the divine elephant martial emperor in the emperor's tomb, but it was an extremely terrible training and test. Every day, Alu was tortured to the point that he wished he was dead, just to pass the training and test and strive to leave that damn place as soon as possible. However, to Alu's despair, his cultivation was indeed breaking through ceaselessly amidst that terrifying tempering, and his combat strength was growing stronger and stronger. However, every single time he intended to escape, he would encounter new tempering and tests. In this way, he had been trapped in the Emperor's tomb since he entered the upper 9 realms, and it wasn't until Lin Sun and the others went to rescue him that he just got out of the trap. At this point, Lin Sun and the others finally understood Alu's experience over the years, and they couldn't help but sigh with emotion. They didn't know whether Alu was lucky or unlucky. If he was lucky, it was because, although he had suffered a lot over the years, he had obtained a rare and incomparably great fortune after all. If he was unlucky, it was because he had been trapped in the Emperor's tomb all these years, unable to see the light of day, and living a miserable life every day. Old Toad's expression was uncertain. So, the Emperor's tomb is really the place where the divine elephant martial emperor passed away? He was the most powerful emperor in the ancient times. How could he die? The big black bird said impatiently, "Your own tragic experience has been mentioned, and it will only make people laugh at you. Hurry up and tell us what benefits you have obtained this time. This is what everyone cares about." Alu was originally feeling sorry for himself and was about to cry, but when he heard this, his eyes immediately widened with anger. "Can you too have a little sympathy? I'm so miserable, and you still think about the good fortune and good fortune?" Old Toad and the big black bird spat in disdain, then stepped forward together and began a new round of threats and promises to Alu. In the end, Alu raised his hand with a look of grief and indignation, and with a clang, a huge slate appeared out of thin air and smashed on the ground. "This is the good fortune of the Emperor's tomb that you are thinking about," Alu said weakly. The slate was about 3 meters long, and it was engraved with dense patterns. The breath of the vicissitudes of life was imprinted on it, and there was a kind of boundless charm of the precipitation of time. However, in the eyes of Lin Sun and the others, it looked like a huge coffin. Chapter 13-14. The number of the previous chapter was repeated and has been revised. This chapter is chapter 1300. Old Toad was startled. "Alu, are you crazy enough to steal the coffin lid of Martial Emperor Divine Elephant?" Alu had the urge to strangle him and said angrily, "Bulsh *t. This is the ancient tablet of Wanxiang left by Martial Emperor Divine Elephant. It contains the Wanxiang body-refining battle diagram and the body-refining experience of Martial Emperor Divine Elephant. How can it be a coffin lid?" Old Toad was not angry but happy. His eyes lit up and he said with a smile, "Why didn't you say so earlier? Come on, let me see." As he spoke, he threw himself onto the stone slab, revealing an incomparably fanatical expression. The large black bird was also indescribably excited. It circled around the stone slab and clicked its tongue in wonder. "Heavens, this is the first time I've come across an inheritance and insight left behind by an emperor." Alu sneered, "You too should give up. Even if you get the ancient tablet of Wanxiang, it's no different from getting a coffin lid for those who don't follow the path of becoming a sage." Old Toad and the big black bird didn't believe it and continued to study it with great enthusiasm. All the emperors were terrifying existences who could overlook the heavens. They could split the sky with a thought and suppress sages and kings. They were like immortal legends, and Martial Emperor Divine Elephant was a legendary giant in ancient times. It was said that his cultivation was strong enough to travel across the universe and suppress sages in the starry sky. Now, who wouldn't be tempted by such an inheritance tablet with the heart of Martial Emperor Divine Elephant in front of them? At the very least, the expressions of the big black bird and Old Toad could only be described as crazy at the moment. Lin Sun was also shocked. He realized that it was no wonder so many strong people were crazy for the fortune of the Emperor's tomb in the ancient land of Wanxiang. Such a treasure would indeed make sages restless. Is it true that only body-refining practitioners can comprehend this tablet? Lin Sun asked. His heart skipped a beat as he suddenly remembered that he still had the 9 clear holy body art. He would have to train his body sooner or later in the future. Alu nodded and said, "Big brother, to tell you the truth, so long as it's an expert that walks on the path of attaining immortality through the fleshly body, then if you obtain this tablet, then you won't have to worry about being unable to ascend to the peak at all." According to what he said, there were 64 myriad image body refinement battle diagrams within this stone stele, and every single diagram had its own profundities and profundities. Not only was it an extremely rare tempering, but it was also a place for one to comprehend the lifetime worth of the divine elephant martial emperor's knowledge and experience in body refinement. During these past few years that he'd been trapped in the emperor's tomb, he'd relied on the inheritance of this tablet to step foot into the peak of body refinement in one go and possess his current combat strength. However, this tablet was utterly useless to other cultivators. Knowing this, Lin Sun felt helpless even though he was tempted. The 3 paths to the apex were divided into soul cultivation, chi refinement, and body tempering. From the beginning to the present, Lin Sun had been taking into account the 2 paths of soul cultivation and chi refining, and he had made extraordinary achievements in these 2 paths. Just like cultivating the soul, his primordial spirit could split into 3, controlling the past, present, and future laws. The strength of his soul was enough to surpass his peers. Just like cultivating the chi, now that he'd entered the 6th retribution of longevity, his combat strength was so strong that he could kill peerless overlords of the same generation as killing chickens and dogs. But cultivating the body was the only thing he'd never touched. One reason was that his energy was limited, and the other was that, in these years of cultivation, he'd never dabbled in cultivating the body. Even the cultivation methods and treasures that he'd come into contact with had almost nothing to do with cultivating the body. Even if he had the supreme inheritance of the holy body technique of 9 purity, he still couldn't cultivate it because he didn't know the method. This also made Lin Sun feel a kind of indescribable helplessness when facing the myriad image ancient tablet. It wasn't that he didn't want to temper his body, but that he had no chance at all. Of course, if he was determined to look for it, he could indeed obtain some methods of refining the body, but ordinary methods couldn't enter his eyes at all. "Big brother, I suggest that you give it a try." Suddenly, Alu opened his mouth and said seriously, "The body is the carrier of the great Tao and can bear the weight of heaven and earth. It is not only a precious tool for cultivating the primordial spirit, but also the foundation of breathing spiritual chi. As the saying goes, if the body is strong, the spirit will be strong. The body is like a boat that can cross the bitter sea of cultivation. If you can become a sage with the body, it's not easy to be killed. As long as the primordial spirit of the soul cultivators is not destroyed, they can live forever. The same is true for the chi practitioners. Only the body cultivators can be reborn as long as a drop of blood remains. Besides, I also found a secret in the tomb of the emperor." Speaking of this, Alu's expression became extremely serious, and he said, "The divine elephant martial emperor was not only a body cultivator, but also his primordial spirit and the method of refining chi were extremely terrifying. According to my speculation, if you want to reach the realm of emperor on the divine path, you must refine the body, refine the chi, and cultivate the soul at the same time." The light in Lin Sun's eyes dimmed. He had never understood these secrets so deeply before. The consideration of 3 kinds of Tao was actually related to the word emperor. Since ancient times, it has been very difficult to become a sage, let alone to become an emperor. But we are different. We happen to be in an unprecedented great era, and we all set foot on the peerless Tao. As long as we don't die, we will have the opportunity to touch a higher realm sooner or later. Alu's eyes were full of longing, and he said excitedly, "And my goal is to surpass the divine elephant martial emperor and set foot on the realm that he has never set foot on." Humph, don't confuse your big brother. Since ancient times, there have been countless strong people who refine the body, refining chi, and cultivating the soul at the same time. But as a result, most of them become mediocre people, and can never set foot on the realm of sage. Suddenly, the old toad turned his head. The reason is well known. One kind of Tao is enough for anyone to pursue in a lifetime, let alone 3 kinds of Tao. At this time, the big black bird also sighed and said, Alu is right. Becoming an emperor is indeed related to taking care of 3 kinds of Tao. But it is only after becoming a sage that one starts to take care of other kinds of Tao. Before becoming a sage, if one cultivates 3 kinds of Tao at the same time, no matter who he is, no matter how amazing and terrifying his talent is, he will encounter a terrible thing when he tries to break through the realm of sage. Speaking of this, the big black bird's voice became extremely dignified. The old toad also seemed to think of something, and his face changed slightly. What is it? Lin Sun frowned. The big black bird spat out 4 words, Tao test of prohibition. Just 4 words, but with a kind of palpitating power, made the big black bird and the old toad extremely afraid. In the past years, there have been many amazing heroes who didn't believe in heresy and tried to take care of 3 kinds of Tao at the same time to break through an unprecedented road to the realm of sage. But in the end, they all died tragically under the Tao test of prohibition. Their bodies and souls were destroyed, and they didn't even have a chance to survive. This road, like a taboo, cuts off all possibilities, like a supreme iron law, and no one in the ancient desolation territory has been able to break it so far. The big black bird's eyes were in a trance. I remember that the holy monk Duji once said that the Tao test of prohibition is a kind of power of cutting Tao. It originates from the indescribable order of heaven and earth. It is a shackle that blocks all pursuits from ancient and modern times. Anyone who touches it will die. Otherwise, why do you think no one dares to step on this road so far? The reason is very simple. Before becoming a sage, it is a dead end. Knowing all this, Lin Sun completely calmed down. He didn't expect that taking care of 3 kinds of Tao at the same time was a dead end. Not to mention that he had no chance to become a sage. He would also encounter a strange Tao test of prohibition. But at this time, Alu retorted, nothing is absolute. In the body-refining experience left by the divine elephant martial emperor, it was said that when the divine elephant martial emperor traveled the ancient way of the starry sky, he had seen a horrible person who took care of 3 kinds of Tao and became a sage. The big black bird and the old toad were both stunned. They almost thought they had heard wrong and blurted out, "Is there such a thing?" Alu's expression was solemn as he said, "I wouldn't dare to lie when it comes to the pursuit of Tao. It's true. The divine elephant martial emperor's imprint had specifically mentioned this. It said that it's not that the Tao ordeal is impossible to overcome, but it's about how one can overcome it without dying, thereby becoming a saint. The divine elephant martial emperor was a legendary giant in the ancient times. His knowledge and wisdom were naturally extraordinary. If this was true, it was really shocking. After all, there had never been a strong man who could pass the Tao test of prohibition in the ancient desolation realm since ancient times. The ancient way of the starry sky transcends the ancient desolation realm. The person that the divine elephant martial emperor saw was definitely not a cultivator of the ancient desolation realm. The big black bird frowned. The old toad also nodded. Yes, if you are in the ancient desolation realm, you will be suppressed by the power of the order of heaven and earth. This is like a shackle. As long as you don't transcend the ancient desolation realm, you will be restricted by it. This was the unanimous conclusion of the two. Perhaps what the divine elephant martial emperor said was true, but this kind of thing was not suitable for the cultivators of the ancient desolation realm at all, because the world was different. What's more, it was the ancient way of the starry sky, a mysterious place that even the sages could hardly touch. It was destined to be different from the ancient desolation realm. But don't forget that this is not the ancient desolation realm. Alu hit the nail on the head. The most important thing is that a great era has come. The ancient desolation realm today is no longer the ancient desolation realm it used to be. In this extremely brilliant great era, everything is possible. The big black bird and the old toad were speechless and couldn't refute. Because what Alu said was indeed true. This great era not only changed the pattern of the ancient desolation realm, but also made the whole ancient desolation realm completely different from the past. This was unprecedented. In the past, the absolute path towards the Tao was like a taboo that no one could step foot into, and it caused countless geniuses since the ancient times to stop while nursing grievances. But now, in the upper 9 realms, peerless figures were not uncommon at all, and there were a lot of them. In this case, why couldn't the dead end, which was regarded as Tao test prohibition, be taken through and crossed? Think about it, if one could set foot on the top of the 3 paths and take care of all of them, as long as he crossed the Tao test prohibition and became a sage in one fell swoop, how terrifying would his cultivation be? To take care of all 3 paths and become a sage, this was absolutely an unprecedented way in the past, and it must be extremely amazing. Even the big black bird and the old toad couldn't help but feel emotional at this moment. Their eyes drifted, and finally, they all looked at Lin Sun. "Big brother, what do you think?" Alu asked. Lin Sun rubbed his eyebrows and pondered for a long time before he squeezed out 4 words. "I want to be alone." Chapter 13:15. Lin Sun didn't make a clear decision. Because whether to refine his body or not was related to his future Tao. The decision of a single thought might change his fate, so he had to be cautious. However, for the big black bird and the old toad, they had given up the idea of comprehending the Wanxiang ancient steel, because refining their body was in conflict with the Tao they sought. From that day on, Lin Sun and the others lived in seclusion on the Flying Star Mountain and paid no attention to the affairs of the world. All of them were tempering and cultivating their own Tao and Dharma. For them, they didn't lack opportunities. What they lacked was a precipitation after a thorough cleansing. Occasionally, when they were free, they would sit on the ground, boil wine and make tea, discuss Tao, and exchange their cultivation experiences and insight. All of them benefited a lot, and their own Tao became more profound and solid. Whether it was Lin Sun, the old toad, Alu, or the big black bird, all of them had amazing attainments in their own Tao, and they had mastered unique and amazing inheritances. They didn't hide anything from each other. They confirmed each other's Tao and Dharma, and the benefits they gained could be described as immeasurable. For example, the big black bird's stomach contained numerous secrets and knowledge of the great Tao. When it discussed the great Tao seriously, the profundities it expounded were so profound that even Lin Sun and the others were extremely moved, and they often felt enlightened and enlightened. For example, the old toad had awakened the innate power of the 3-legged golden toad and obtained the supreme inheritance left by Chun Linkong, the burning immortal. His knowledge of Tao could be said to be unique. Another example was Alu, who walked on the path of becoming a sage with his body. Lin Sun and the others couldn't compare with him in opening the divine treasure of the body and using his own essence, qi, and spirit. Lin Sun and the others were amazed by the rich experience Lin Sun had accumulated since he started cultivating. Now they gathered together to cultivate and communicate with each other without any worries. Imperceptibly, their Tao was precipitated to the extreme. In ancient times, the sages regarded Tao as the sky, so they often got together to chat and exchange their experiences. Thus, they gathered the strengths of hundreds of schools and created brilliant and dazzling cultivation methods for later generations. Lin Sun and the others' discussion was just like chatting. In the exchange, they could draw inferences about other things by analogy. This unique way of cultivation was of great benefit to each of them. Occasionally, when they gained something in their hearts, they couldn't help but spar with each other, and it was extremely satisfying and satisfying. Sometimes Little Silver would also participate, but most of the time he just listened. He was a descendant of the soul-eater insect, and strictly speaking, could be considered a soul cultivator. However, whether it was Alu, Old Toad or the big blackbird, none of them were willing to spar with Little Silver. There was nothing that could be done about it. Little Silver's attacks were too treacherous and swift. He was a one-hit kill, which was impossible to guard against and was an incomparable headache. But Little Silver didn't care about all this. As long as he had an epiphany, he would straightaway make a move without any warning. Every time, Old Toad and the others cursed out loud in alarm, but there was nothing they could do. Every time this happened, Lin soon couldn't stop laughing, feeling very proud of Little Silver. Time passed in this kind of secluded cultivation. Lin Sun and the others didn't care about the affairs of the world, and they wanted to consolidate and sublimate their own path in meditation. But it didn't mean that the outside world didn't pay attention to them. Before long, the entire distant fire realm knew that Fiend Celestial Lin was cultivating on Flying Star Mountain, attracting the attention of many factions. Almost every day, many secret agents would come to the vicinity of Flying Star Mountain to investigate and observe the situation. After all, over the years, Lin Sun had already cultivated an almost invincible reputation and prestige through his many bloody achievements. Who wouldn't pay attention to such a ruthless person whose name shook the Upper Nine Realm, now living in seclusion on Flying Star Mountain? But as time passed, when they realized that Fiend Celestial Lin really intended to cultivate in seclusion and didn't intend to get involved in the outside world's affairs, some were disappointed, while others secretly rejoiced. Everyone knew that as long as Fiend Celestial Lin intervened, it was bound to cause great turmoil, accompanied by a storm of blood. But now, such a ruthless person suddenly seemed to have washed his hands of the outside world and no longer cared about the disputes of the outside world, which was naturally very shocking. The seal on the true dragon lair has been lifted. It's said that Yi Mof, Mi Hengzhen, Wang Xuanyu, and other overlord-level figures have all gone there. This heaven-defying good fortune has long attracted attention from all sides. It's rumored that Xiaohao, Fairy Ruowu, Yuan Fatian, and the others, who are ranked at the top of the Heavenly Sun's golden list, have also taken action. Soon, the news spread throughout the Upper Nine Realm, causing a great earthquake. Where's Fiend Celestial Lin? Should we take action? No, he has been cultivating in seclusion. When they learned that Lin Sun still hadn't left Flying Star Mountain in the face of such a great opportunity as the true dragon lair, some experts almost couldn't believe their ears. But it was true, and they had no choice but to believe it. Is Fiend Celestial Lin afraid to compete with other ruthless people? Many people were suspicious, thinking that Lin Sun's seclusion was a kind of retreat, which was not in line with his strong style in the past. It was very abnormal. You're all wrong. Isn't it a great courage to retreat in the face of crisis? Fiend Celestial Lin may have missed some great opportunities this time, but after this accumulation, I'm afraid he will become more powerful in the future. An expert ranked at the top of the Heavenly Sun's golden list sighed with emotion. If there is only opportunity in one's eyes, he is destined to be led by the nose by the opportunity, so that he will neglect the essentials and lose more than he gains. In my opinion, I'm afraid that Lin Sun has other plans. He has long seen through the gains and losses of the moment, and has focused on his own cultivation. When Mi Hengzhen, who arrived before the true dragon lair, found out about this, he couldn't help but be moved. Originally, he'd sent Xiao Qinghe to Flying Star Mountain to invite Lin Sun to explore the true dragon lair together. But unfortunately, Lin Sun refused. Now, Mi Hengzhen finally faintly understood why Lin Sun refused, and it caused him to be unable to help but arouse a trace of admiration in his heart. It was difficult to gain and give up, and it was even more difficult to give up. Giving up was a great tempering of one's mental state. Are you really going to give up just like that? On Flying Star Mountain, Ji Xingyao sat casually on a rock, while her clothes and hair fluttered in the wind, and her appearance was picturesque and otherworldly. Aren't you the same? Lin Sun smiled as he passed a cup of tea. He brewed himself to Ji Xingyao in a leisurely manner. Compared to the past, Lin Sun's aura was plain and flat while his gaze was clear and clean, and he sat there casually without the slightest edge. But in Ji Xingyao's eyes, Lin Sun seemed more and more unfathomable. His aura was close to Tao, which was invisible and indescribable. She was in a trance for a moment, and then she couldn't help but sigh with emotion. "I'm different from you. You regard the opportunities in the true dragon lair as fleeting clouds and have no desire in your heart, so you don't ask for anything. But I know that the place is bound to cause monstrous bloodshed, and I know that even if I go there, I won't be able to get anything in the end, so I have to give up." Speaking of this, Ji Xingyao couldn't help but show a touch of helplessness at the corner of her mouth. "This is the gap between us. I can't get what I want, so I can only protect myself and compromise." Lin Sun smiled and said, "The struggle for the Tao can't be decided overnight. Since Miss Ji can distinguish between advance and retreat, you will definitely go further on the road of Tao in the future." Ji Xingyao smiled, raised her cup and drank tea, and then said, "There is less than a year left before the end of the Absolute Summit domain. At this moment, all the overlords in the upper 9 realms are racing against time to seek the final breakthrough. I wonder what Brother Lin's plan is?" Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, "Does killing Yun Qinbai count?" These words were spoken in a casual and calm manner, without the slightest hint of anger. Even his emotions were calm and natural. Ji Xingyao was stunned and nodded. "No wonder Brother Lin hibernated here. It turns out that you are wholeheartedly cultivating." "Cultivating?" Lin Sun said with a smile. "Kind of." After sending away Ji Xingyao who came to visit, Lin Sun pondered the word cultivating alone and couldn't help but be lost in thought. In the past, when Yun Qinbai was mentioned, there would be uncontrollable killing intent in his heart, which affected the fluctuation of his mind. But now, the existence of Yun Qinbai seemed to no longer make him feel that kind of feeling of wanting to kill but not being able to. Was it because his mentality had changed? No. It was because he was really fearless. Thinking of this, Lin Sun's calm and clear eyes showed a touch of understanding. Feeling excited, he made a stroke in the void with his fingers. Whoosh! On Flying Star Mountain, a ray of sword chi tore the sky like a rainbow, and its sharpness covered the light of the sun and moon. This sword was called Never Return. However, now Lin Sun had reached the primary level of its mystery. Half a month later, the dispute caused by the emergence of the true dragon lair came to an end. According to statistics, the number of strong casualties reached thousands, and blood flowed like a river. In the end, only a few people got the good fortune. Among them, Xiaohao shone brilliantly. He fought against many enemies alone, won the greatest good fortune, and left. In addition, some ancient freaks such as Ruo Wu, the descendant of Rosefinch, Yuan Fatian, the descendant of Yu Yang, Little Golden-Winged Rock, and the contemporary overlords such as Yi Moha, Mi Hengzhen, and Wang Xuanyu all got their own gains. It was worth mentioning that, like Lin Sun, Yun Qinbai had never shown up. Strictly speaking, since he was chased by Lin Sun in the Buddha land 2 years ago, Yun Qinbai seemed to disappear from the world. So far, there had been no news about him. But no matter who it was impossible to ignore such a peerless swordsman with unparalleled ability. Everyone had a hunch that when Yun Qinbai showed up again, the first person he would deal with would be Lin Sun, because they all knew that there was a great hatred between him and Lin Sun, and that a group of descendants of the heaven-reaching sword sect had been killed by Lin Sun. However, few people knew that just when the true dragon lair came to an end, Lin Sun, who had been dormant for half a year on Flying Star Mountain, ushered in the 7th tribulation on the road to immortality. The Karma Tribulation. Karma, like karma and karma, was predetermined, as illusory as karma and fate. The Karma Tribulation involved all kinds of fetters and shackles on the road of cultivation, and the power of the tribulation it produced was extremely terrifying. For Lin Sun, this tribulation was definitely the most dangerous and terrifying tribulation he had encountered since he set foot on the road to immortality. Because there were too many karma entangled in him. P.S. I'll make up more tonight. Chapter 13:16. The cause and effect of Lin Sun were like fine lines, densely packed, which had been affecting his cultivation all these years. For example, the gate to heaven, the wordless pagoda, the broken blade, the insignificant bow, and even the fire of wonders he obtained were all related to the karma of the ruins of wonders. All of these were tangible karma. Whether it was good or bad, it would have some kind of influence on him. Lin Sun's blood feud since he was a child, his pursuit of cultivation, and the footprints he left on the road of cultivation were also accompanied by karma. All of these could be regarded as invisible karma. Anyone who cultivated would inevitably be affected by it. Even a sage couldn't break the shackles of karma without being bound by karma. However, relatively speaking, the karma accumulated by Lin Sun was too much and too heavy. Therefore, in the face of the tribulation of karma disaster, the danger Lin Sun suffered was far more than ordinary. This tribulation also made Lin Sun go through hardships and dangers. He fought between life and death and survived in destruction. He was almost wiped out by the tribulation thunder several times. Even the big blackbird, Old Toad, and Alu couldn't calm down. They didn't expect that there would be such a terrible, strange, and unreasonable karma disaster in this world. After struggling in the tribulation thunder for 3 days and 3 nights, Lin Sun finally passed the 7th tribulation on the road of longevity. After the tribulation, his body had long been broken and destroyed, and only a wisp of thought was left in his spirit, which was almost completely destroyed. But the benefits after passing the tribulation were also amazing. In the next half-month, Lin Sun not only recovered as before, but also his cultivation was sublimated to the extreme, and his strength also underwent a tremendous transformation. When fighting with all their strength, even Alu and Old Toad couldn't suppress Lin Sun together. Instead, they were beaten by Lin Sun, screaming and shouting that he was abnormal. Before Lin Sun passed the tribulation, Alu and Old Toad had also entered the 7th retribution of longevity. But even if they joined forces, they still couldn't defeat Lin Sun. Buzz. On the cliff, Lin Sun stretched his body casually, deducing his own Tao and law in the clouds. His clothes were fluttering, and his figure was ethereal, like an immortal practicing martial arts. Now, the power of the great Tao he had mastered had reached the realm of Tao Law. Tao Law was the law. Only by fusing it with the martial Tao could the power of the law be unleashed to the extreme. Different grand Tao laws possessed different might, but there was no difference in strength, only whether they were suitable or not. Now, what Lin Sun was doing was Tao fusion. He'd fused the various grand Tao laws he'd grasped into the star obliteration sky-devouring Tao, causing his Tao and technique to completely fuse together. This step was very difficult. Throughout the ages, at least before becoming a saint, there were very few people who were able to combine all the great Taos they had grasped and thoroughly master them. Lin Sun didn't seek to achieve mastery through a comprehensive study. He only wanted to use the devouring star obliteration Tao as a furnace to incorporate the energy of other great Taos into it for his own use. It was like how the star obliteration and sky-devouring Tao was the commander, and it guided and controlled the energy of the various grand Taos to cause them to erupt with their strongest might. Boom! In the layer of clouds, the sound of the Tao surged. Sometimes, the roar of a true dragon resounded, sometimes a fire and water lotus bloomed, sometimes a yin and yang fish transformed into a taiji cycle, and sometimes an undying aura lingered endlessly. In the end, these visions all floated in a big abyss, making the sky there seem to be swallowed up, and all the stars were annihilated in it. And Lin Sun's figure, like the ruler of the abyss, faintly had a transcendent demeanor. Until a few days later, Lin Sun's figure suddenly stopped, and the aura around him was released. With a bang, there seemed to be a thunderclap between heaven and earth. The void in all directions collapsed and the clouds were shattered. A ray of heavenly light poured down, covering Lin Sun's tall figure with a sacred luster, like a god in ancient legends. "Be careful, elder brother!" With a loud shout, Alu rose into the air and raised his fist to attack. Seeing this, Old Toad and the big black bird both showed pity. Sure enough, in just a moment Alu was suppressed. His face was covered with dust and his nose was swollen. He gasped, and his cheeks were twitching because of the severe pain. Looking at Lin Sun again, his aura was simple and tranquil, almost no different from ordinary people. There was a faint bearing of returning to simplicity. "Elder brother, have you succeeded in Dao fusion?" Alu couldn't help asking. "It's not a real Dao fusion, but the power of the Great Way I have mastered can be used in the Devouring Star Way." Speaking of this, Lin Sun smiled. "Let's not talk about cultivation today. Let's go and have a drink." "Well, I can't beat you, but I can drink with you." Alu's heroic spirit reached the clouds. The big black bird and the old toad also rubbed their palms. The Wind Realm. In a famed blessed land, Yuan Fatian suddenly opened his eyes, and an incomparably dazzling bolt of lightning shot out from his pupils. Crack! The void was torn apart by his eyes. "There is only about half a year left before the end of the Absolute Domain. Now I have practiced the 9 purity holy body tactics to the advanced level. It's time to settle the score." Yuan Fatian stood up, and his blood and qi were rolling all over his body, which made the world change color. He was thin and dressed in feather clothes, but when he walked, he was like a moving mountain, shaking the world and making the void tremble and wail. Whoosh! The next moment, his figure rushed up and flew away. But when he was halfway, a voice suddenly sounded in his ears. "Monkey, you are so murderous. Who are you going to seek revenge from?" Accompanied by the voice, a dazzling golden light swept out from the clouds. Looking carefully, it was a golden-winged roc, flapping its wings like clouds in the sky, surrounded by thunder and lightning. "Tut tut, it seems that you have refined a jar of true dragon's precious blood obtained from the true dragon's lair, and your physical strength has transformed again." The golden-winged roc suddenly turned into an ordinary-looking young man in a golden robe. His eyes were like the blazing sun, looking Yuan Fatian up and down. "Little golden-winged roc, it's you." Yuan Fatian looked relaxed and said, "I'm going to the distant fire realm to find Demon God Lin and solve an old hatred." "Demon God Lin?" The young golden-winged roc's eyes lit up. "According to what I know, he has been lurking in Flying Star Mountain for the past half a year." "How did you become enemies with him?" "Back then, I was in the sinkhole, but this fellow barged into the land of silence and snatched away my race's supreme secret technique inheritance. How can I not take revenge for this?" Yuan Fatian's eyes were filled with murderous intent and his expression was cold. 9 pure body technique? The young golden-winged roc was moved. He knew very well that the Yu Yang lineage's 9 pure body technique had an extremely great origin. It was the supreme secret technique of the body-tempering lineage. "So, you are going to kill him?" The young golden-winged roc's eyes burned. Yuan Fatian frowned, sighed, and said, "Yuan Zuwing, who has been watching over me all this time, once told me to show mercy when I seek revenge. After thinking about it, I decided to spare his life, as long as I promise not to kill him." The young golden-winged roc had a strange expression as he said, "Let's go. I'll go with you. 2 years ago I also wanted to fight this demon god Lin. Let's make it clear first. I'll be the first to attack," said Yuan Fatian. "Of course." The young golden-winged roc's eyes flashed with fanaticism as he said this. "I wonder if demon god Lin's combat power has improved." Distant fire realm, in front of Flying Star Mountain. Boom! An earth-shattering collision sounded. A figure flew out like a broken sandbag and fell to the ground, causing smoke and dust to fill the air. Alu grinned. "That's all you've got?" You can't even get past me. How dare you try to spar with my elder brother? You really don't know your place." In the distance, the defeated expert got up with a face full of chagrin. He glared at Alu fiercely before leaving in shame and indignation. "Who else is unconvinced? Come forward!" Alu shouted at the top of his lungs. Recently, many strong practitioners came from all directions, claiming to compete with Lin Sun to prove their martial arts and see who was the better one. Lin Sun naturally couldn't be bothered with them. However, if he didn't show up, he would be seen as a coward, which made those challengers feel disdain. This angered Alu, Old Toad, and the others. They had been staying on Flying Star Mountain for the past 6 months and were feeling bored. Now that someone had come looking for a beating, how could they remain indifferent? "You can't even get past my third brother. How pathetic. Is there no one who can fight?" Old Toad also shouted at the top of his lungs, wishing for the world to be in chaos. Nearby, some experts looked at each other. "That barbarian is the guy who obtained the fortune of the Emperor's tomb in the ancient land of Wanxiang, right? His combat power is indeed terrifying. It's extraordinary." In the distance, someone was whispering, "That green-robed youth is also extraordinary. His name is Jean D, a descendant of the three-legged golden toad. He has obtained great fortune and his combat power is no weaker than that barbarian Alu. Unfortunately, there are 2 people in the way. No matter who it is, if they want to see Demon God Lin, they'll have to get past these 2 first." Yes, nowadays, the outside world is speculating what Demon God Lin is doing and whether his strength has improved again. But so far, no one has seen him appear. Just as the crowd was talking, suddenly, a cold shout sounded in the sky. "Lin Sun, come out and fight!" The voice was like a thunderclap, shaking the world and filled with a terrible murderous aura, which shocked everyone present and made them look up at the same time. In the sky, a thin figure broke through the air like thunder, with monstrous chi and blood. Standing casually, he exuded a domineering, cold, and ferocious momentum. Yuan Fatian, a descendant of Yu Liang. There was a commotion in the field, and many people's eyes lit up. Finally, a peerless, ruthless person had come to fight Lin Sun. No, there's also the young golden-winged Rock King. He's also here. Suddenly, someone noticed that at the same time as Yuan Fatian's arrival, another figure appeared. He was dressed in a golden robe, and his eyes were as bright as the sun, shining with golden light. His appearance seemed ordinary, but he had an air of arrogance as if he was looking down on all living beings. It was the young golden-winged Rock King. For a time, the field was more and more stirred. Both Yuan Fatian and the young golden-winged Rock King were peerless figures among the ancient freaks. In the battle for the true dragon's lair, both of them had shown great power and attracted the attention of all people. Their combat power was extremely terrifying. And today, these 2 peerless and ruthless people actually came together and arrived at Flying Star Mountain. Chapter 13:17. The world was gloomy, and a murderous aura oppressed the field. The powerhouses in the field retreated subconsciously. The power of Yuan Fatian and the young golden-winged Rock King made them tremble and feel oppressed. Alu and Old Toad were stunned at first, and then their eyes lit up with fanaticism. Finally, someone who looks good has come. Alu's fighting spirit was boiling. "Hey, don't fight with me. Let me see if this guy is just an empty shell." Old Toad also rubbed its palms together, looking like it was ready to make a move. Yuan Fatian was stunned, and then he flew into a rage and said coldly, "Who are you? How dare you bark in front of me? I'll give you a chance to call Lin Sun out and I'll spare your lives." His voice was like thunder, exploding between heaven and earth, making Yuan Fatian's power even more terrifying. Wow, he's a physique practitioner. Alu's eyes became brighter and brighter, as if he was staring at his prey. There was an unprecedented excitement in his eyes, and his chi and blood were boiling. At the same time, Yuan Fatian also noticed that Alu's aura was not simple. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Are you also a physique practitioner?" Boom. Alu suddenly soared into the sky and grinned. "My friend, do you want to have a game? If you defeat me, I promise you can see my elder brother. If you lose, don't blame me for torturing you." Yuan Fatian was so angry that he laughed. "I've never been afraid of anyone when it comes to physique refining. I advise you not to provoke me, or you'll only die miserably." His voice was full of disdain. He was a descendant of Yu Liang, who lived in the ultimate ruins, one of the 4 great divine ruins of ancient times. He cultivated the 9 purity holy body technique, and his physique refining method had already reached the peak. He was not afraid of anyone in the world. Alu's provocation gave him the impression that he was showing off his slight skill in front of an expert, stupid and ignorant. "Alu, he obviously looks down on you. Why don't you let me do it?" Old Toad shouted. "Bullshit, see how I torture him." With a roar, Alu's skin bulged, and his whole body exuded monstrous blood chi, as if he had turned into a barbarian god. His aura alone caused the nearby void to collapse and roar. Boom! Alu made his move. He punched out, and the image of a divine elephant pressing down on the starry sky appeared in the void, covering the sky and covering the earth. A Supreme Emperor World Suppression Technique. Monkey, this person is the successor of the divine elephant martial emperor. You must not be careless. In the distance, the young golden-winged rock king quickly warned. Humph! Yuan Fatian's expression was ice-cold, and clanging sounds that resembled the cries of swords rang out from within his body. It was the embodiment of the extremely terrifying power of his chi and blood. Numerous strands of gorgeous clear light appeared around him, and they illuminated the world. Faintly, it seemed as if there were gods residing within those strands of clear light, and they were chanting scriptures within them. It was a shocking scene. "Open!" Yuan Fatian leaped forward and similarly struck out with his fist. The force of his fist seemed as if it was carved out of glass, yet it was boundlessly terrifying. It possessed the power to overturn the world and destroy mountains and rivers. Boom! The two of them were simply like comets colliding with each other, and they erupted with terrifying rumbling. That expanse of the heavens and the earth suddenly fell into chaos while the layer of clouds collapsed, and the rumbling of the Tao resounded without end. Thud, thud, thud. Under the astounded gazes of the crowd, Yuan Fatian and Alu were both shaken to the point of taking a few steps back. "Not bad. Not bad at all." Alu shouted loudly and was extremely excited. This was the first time he'd encountered a body refiner that was on par with him since he'd started cultivating, and the battle intent in his heart was completely ignited. Humph! Yuan Fatian's gaze was piercingly cold, and he'd restrained the contempt in his heart. He knew how terrifying an existence the divine elephant martial emperor was, and as the martial emperor's successor, this barbarian's attainments in the Tao of body refinement were indeed extraordinary. Kill! Coincidentally, the two of them collided once more. Boom! The heavens and the earth shook. When looked at from afar, it seemed as if two gods were colliding, and the terrifying strength of their bodies emanated a might that could destroy the world. On the ground, the spectators gasped. Yuan Fatian was a peerlessly ruthless figure. His physical strength was sufficient to look down upon all, and his combat strength was extraordinary. However, the body refinement strength that Alu revealed wasn't inferior to Yuan Fatian at all, and he forcefully fought Yuan Fatian on par. Alu is also a character accompanied by great luck. It's not easy for him to reach such a high level in the Tao of body refinement. Golden-Winged Rock King was also secretly surprised. They came here to deal with Lin Sun. Who would have thought that an extremely tyrannical figure would appear before they even saw Lin Sun? "Little Rock, why don't we play together?" Suddenly, the Golden-Winged Rock King's vision blurred. It saw a green-robed youth standing 1,000 feet away with a smile. "Toad, I advise you not to humiliate yourself. Golden-winged Rock King's face darkened, and a touch of coldness rushed out from between his eyebrows. He wore a golden robe and looked ordinary, but he had the arrogance of a king. As a descendant of the golden-winged rock, who dared to call him that? How arrogant you are! Today I'll show you what it means to be so brave. Suddenly the old toad attacked. His breath swallowed the sun and the moon, and like a flash of lightning, his palms and fingers turned into sabers and chopped at Lin Sun. How fierce! Many people secretly clicked their tongues. In the past, the world knew that Lin Sun was courageous, but they didn't expect that even his two brothers were more fierce than the other. That was the young golden-winged Rock King, a peerless overlord, arrogant, and braver than his peers. Over the years, although he kept a low profile, no one dared to ignore his existence. But the old toad didn't care at all. A frog at the bottom of a well, reckless. The young golden-winged Rock King was also angry. His figure burst out a bright golden light, crackling, and bright electric arcs rolled around him. In an instant, he seemed to become another person, emitting a peerless sharpness. Every move he made exuded the power of disdain for all living beings. Crack of the sky! A dazzling golden light swept out of the palm of the young golden-winged Rock King. It was sharp and dazzling like a divine sword or an immortal saber. Boom! There, the sky and the earth were turned upside down, and the rain of light was blazing. To the surprise of the young golden-winged Rock King, the green-robed teenager was only shaken back in this attack, but was not injured. It should be noted that this attack was enough to easily kill his peers without reservation. But now it was blocked, which undoubtedly proved that the opponent's combat power should not be underestimated. "Come again!" the old toad shouted arrogantly. His golden eyes were full of raging flames of war. He pushed forward, his long hair dancing wildly, and his handsome face was full of arrogance. "Since you want to die, I'll help you." The young golden-winged Rock King's face sank completely. He felt that his dignity had been offended. Without hesitation, he let go and rushed forward violently. Boom! In an instant the two had fought hundreds of times. The sky was dark, the sun and the moon were dim, and the void was full of their afterimages. For a time, the strong people watching the battle in the distance were trembling with excitement. They never thought that in such a short time, there would be two unparalleled battles. Both Yuan Fatian and the young golden-winged Rock King had met strong opponents. It was rare to see a battle of this level. How could people not be excited? Lin Sun's figure had appeared at the top of Flying Star Mountain. He looked at the two battles in the distance with a calm expression. However, when he saw Yuan Fatian, he thought to himself, "I was looking for you, but you took the initiative to come to me." For a moment, he looked at Yuan Fatian with a hint of playfulness in his eyes. A few days ago, when he seriously thought about the matter of body refining, Lin Sun had made a decision in his heart. But he needed an opportunity to put it into practice, and this opportunity fell on Yuan Fatian. At this moment, Lin Sun even had a feeling that it was a predestined coincidence. "Alu, since this guy dares to offend us, we must not let him escape." Lin Sun suddenly let out a clear voice, which resounded between heaven and earth. "Demon Lin!" All the people present were shocked and then boiling. Demon Lin, who had been dormant all the time, also showed up at this moment. It could be foreseen that today's battle was destined to not end peacefully. "Big brother, don't worry. I will capture this bastard." Alu laughed in a rough and heroic manner. Seeing all this, Yuan Fatian was furious. His eyes were red and full of killing intent. "Lin Sun, after I kill this barbarian, I will come to you for revenge. Don't worry, I promise I won't kill you." He shouted, and his aura became stronger and stronger. Lin Sun smiled and said no more. But in the next moment, his eyes narrowed, and he suddenly looked towards another direction while he said via voice transmission, "Big brother, hey, more people are coming. I'll go meet them. You watch Alu's battle and make a move when you need to." After saying that, he rose into the air, put his hands behind his back, and stood in the clouds, waiting quietly. On Flying Star Mountain, the big black bird poked its head out sneakily and looked at the sky in the distance. It suddenly understood and said with a smile, "Leave it to me." The next moment it disappeared. At this moment, a sweet voice like the sound of nature resounded on Flying Star Mountain. Wanine, the maid of the Emperor, and a group of fellow practitioners come to visit fellow Taoist Lin Sun. Under the shocked gazes of everyone, a group of figures appeared in the distant sky, and the person in the lead was a graceful woman that was coiled in the hazy misty rain, causing her to seem like a celestial maiden that had descended to the mortal world. Behind her, there were 5 figures, both men and women. All of them were flying in the air, and their aura was as powerful as that of gods. There was a dead silence in the field. Everyone was shocked and doubtful. No one had expected that today would be so lively. After the arrival of Yuan Fatian and the young golden-winged roc, there would be more people coming to Flying Star Mountain with great momentum. Even Old Toad, Alu, Yuan Fatian, and the young golden-winged roc, who were fighting fiercely, were a little surprised at this moment. But soon, they couldn't care about this and focused on the battle without being distracted. Yu Shi, Bygone, Yao Li, Lin Sun glanced at them and immediately recognized several familiar faces. Finally, his eyes fell on Wanine, who was the leader, and he understood. When he rescued Alu in the ancient land of Wanxiang, he once cut a peerless figure hiding in the dark with a sword. Now it seemed that it was this woman named Wanine. P.S. This is a patch. Chapter 13:18. Dressed in plain clothes, Wanine was tall and slender. She stood in the air like a fairy of the moon sect, with a unique restraint and calmness. Behind her, Yu Shi, Bygone, Yao Li and others were following her. Although they looked different, their auras were astonishingly powerful, which made Wanine's identity more extraordinary. The appearance of such a group of people immediately became the focus of attention. "You came to visit me?" Lin Sun stood in the void with a plain aura. He was a little puzzled. After the Imperial Prince found out about our conflict with fellow Daoist Lin, he ordered us to come here to apologize to fellow Daoist Lin and resolve this misunderstanding. Wanine said softly. Her voice was as pleasant as the sound of nature, ethereal and ethereal. "Who is your highness?" Lin Sun was lost in thought. Just to apologize? He felt a little abnormal. Wanine smiled calmly like an orchid in an empty valley, and she had an otherworldly bearing as she said in a light voice, "Fellow Daoist Lin ought to have heard of it." Speaking of which, fellow Daoist Lin and Lord Imperial Prince had a conversation before Starfall Peak in the West Hung world. "Could it be that you don't remember?" "Xiaohao?" Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. Wanine nodded slightly. It turned out to be this man. Lin Sun was also a little surprised. Xiaohao, the young master of the Serene Star Imperial family, once lived in a constellation egg. His background was unfathomable. This man had great perseverance, boldness, and ambition. As early as the first time they met, he had left a very deep impression on Lin Sun. He even predicted that when Xiaohao came out, he would inevitably cause a storm in the world. It was impossible for him to be unknown. Today's series of facts undoubtedly proved this point. Today, Xiaohao ranked first on the Tianjiao Golden List and was the strongest in the upper 9 realms. In the Battle of the True Dragon Lair not long ago, he defeated many enemies and became the biggest winner. However, Lin Sun didn't expect that Xiaohao would be the prince mentioned by Wanine. In fact, it was reasonable to think about it carefully. After all, Xiaohao was the young master of the Serene Star Imperial family, so it was reasonable to call him Prince. What? The mysterious prince is the overlord Xiaohao who ranks first on the Tianjiao Golden List in the upper 9 realms? This guy has hidden his strength well. When the crowd found out about this, an uproar arose as well. All the heroes were shocked and caught off guard. Because it was the first time they'd heard that a peerless overlord like Xiaohao actually had such an identity. After all, since the curtains to the battle before the tomb came to an end, the guesses towards the identities of Yushi, Bai Gan, Yao Li, and the others had drawn the attention of numerous great powers. After all, these people's battle prowess was ridiculously strong, but they were all nameless before this, so it was difficult for them not to attract attention. Now, everyone finally came to a complete understanding. It turned out that this group of ferocious figures that kept a low profile and were practically nameless were actually subordinates of Imperial Prince Xiaohao. This was too shocking. Xiaohao alone was already like the sun in the sky. His brilliance overshadowed the entire upper 9 realms. Now, with such a group of hidden and ruthless characters following him, the power gathered was terrifying enough to frighten anyone. I didn't expect that your crown prince still remembers me. Lin Sun looked calm. In this case, there is no need to mention the previous misunderstandings and conflicts. Ignorance is not a crime. Humph. In the distance, Bai Gan let out a cold snort. Lin Sun, what's your attitude? If it weren't for the order of the crown prince, do you think we would apologize to you? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and his voice became cold. So, you came here to apologize reluctantly? Taoism Peer Lin, don't get me wrong. The crown prince's attitude is our attitude. We come here to bury the hatchet. Wan Yin said softly. Well, I understand. You can go now. Lin Sun ordered them to leave. The reason why he chose to forgive them before was not that he was generous, but that he didn't want to offend them for the sake of Xiaohao. If the other side thought that Lin Sun was easy to talk to, they were wrong. Misunderstandings could be resolved, but it didn't mean that Lin Sun would change his attitude towards them. What's your attitude? There was an irrepressible chill between Bai Gan's eyebrows. Yushi, Yao Li and others also frowned. They came here to apologize reluctantly. If it weren't for Xiaohao's explicit order, they wouldn't have chosen to bear it and bow their heads. But now, Lin Sun showed an ungrateful attitude and asked them to leave in a tough manner. What did he think they were? This is my attitude. Is there a problem? Lin Sun looked calmer and colder. Since they apologized, they should show their sincerity. But until now, he didn't see any sincerity. A wisp of gloominess appeared on the faces of Bai Gan and the others. The atmosphere became tense imperceptibly. In the distance, everyone was shocked and doubtful. Only then did they realize that the arrival of Wan Yin and others didn't seem to be just to apologize to Lin Sun. And the tough attitude Lin Sun showed also made them click their tongues. They were a group of peerless, ruthless people under Xiaohao's command, but Lin Sun was not polite at all. Taoism Peer Lin, we came here on the order of the Crown Prince to apologize to you, and on the other hand, we came here for another matter. Wan Yin had been very calm and composed. Her figure was ethereal like a misty rain, giving people a feeling of being unable to see through her. It turns out that you didn't come here just to apologize. Tell me, why did you come here? Lin Sun sneered. He had a premonition that if it was just for an apology, there was no need to mobilize so many people. Before we talk, allow me to introduce fellow Taoist Lin to my fellow Taoists. Wan Yin seemed to be very patient, and her tone was ethereal. This is Bai Gan, an expert of the White Tiger bloodline. I think Taoism Peer Lin has heard of the White Tiger bloodline. At the beginning of the ancient times, the White Tiger bloodline was known as the God of Slaughter clan with extraordinary resources. Now, Taoism Peer Bai Gan has stepped into the great perfection of the 7 tribulations of longevity realm. Wan Yin introduced. Humph! A wisp of arrogance appeared between Bai Gan's brows. His white hair fluttered in the wind, and there was an invisible murderous aura around him, reflecting the scene of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The hearts of everyone trembled. The rumors really are true. This Bai Gan is actually a descendant of the White Tiger. This is a clan that can compare with the true dragon, immortal phoenix, vermilion bird, and other living beings, and its murderous aura is world-shaking. He really is a descendant of the White Tiger bloodline. But when he fought me that day, the strength he revealed didn't seem to live up to his reputation. Lin Sun's casual words caused the expression of the originally extremely arrogant bygone to instantly turn gloomy, and a terrifying killing intent surged within his eyes. This is Yu Shi from the Bai and bloodline. The Bai and bloodline once reigned supreme in the ancient times. Miss Yu Shi has already awakened her bloodline talent, and she possesses a deep cultivation in the seventh tribulation of longevity realm. Wan Yin continued her introduction. Greetings, Taoism Peer Lin. Yu Shi looked like a 6 or 7-year-old little girl. She wore red clothes, but her eyes were charming and alluring, and it gave others an extremely great contrast. The Bai and bloodline. Many people felt their hands and feet go cold. This was an ancient ferocious living being that liked to devour experts, and it was extremely brutal. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, probably no one would dare believe that such a little girl would actually be a descendant of the Baian. This is Yao Li, a spirit embryo born from the innate wind source. He can be called a descendant of the wind god. His talent is shocking, and he possesses unparalleled speed. Yao Li's figure was like a blurry shadow that flickered in the void, as if he would disappear at any moment, and he gave others an unfathomable feeling of drifting. Taoism Peer Lin, where's that big blackbird from last time? I'm very interested in it. Yao Li's voice was hoarse, and it flickered left and right, emitting a penetrating cold aura. If you're interested, then stay. I'll introduce you to him later. Lin Sun glanced at him and spoke calmly. As for these two, they are twin brothers from the malevolent demon clan. The elder brother is called Yan Shan and the younger brother is called Yan Hai. Both of them are extraordinary experts who inherited the ancient innate demon Tao. Their body-tempering techniques can be said to be peerless. The fiend bloodline. Yan Shan and Yan Hai were both skinny like ascetic monk. Their breath was as steady as a mountain, and their spirits were extremely condensed. The two of them stood there, looking exactly the same. They were like two mountains, and their bodies contained an incomparably terrifying power of blood qi. Just looking at them from a distance, they gave people a feeling that they were unshakable. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. It was the first time he had seen these two people. The rarest thing was that they were twin stars, and both of them were on the path of becoming saint. Their combat power must be amazing. On the other hand, the surroundings were deathly silent since a long time ago. After knowing the origins of Yu Shi, bygone, Yao Li, Yan Shan, and Yan Hai, everyone knew that these five were extremely dangerous people. Coupled with the mysterious woman Wan Yin, this lineup was enough to make people feel cold and afraid in any place in the upper 9 realms. Now that the introduction is over, it's time to get down to business, right? Lin Sun's expression was calm, or in other words, from the beginning to the end, he never had a trace of emotion. This lineup was indeed frightening. However, if they thought that they would be able to intimidate him and affect his state of mind, then they were gravely mistaken. At least, as far as Lin Sun knew, some of the ruthless people who died in his hands were no worse than these people in terms of background, such as Ming Child, Bai Longting, and so on. Fellow Taoist Lin is a straightforward person, and I admire him very much. To tell you the truth, we came here for only one purpose, and that is to ask fellow Taoist Lin to hand over the god-devouring insect. This is the guardian insect of Lord Imperial Prince's bloodline, and we can't lose it. Wan Yin expressed her purpose. It turns out that you are here for this. Lin Sun glanced at Wan Yin and others. Is this Xiaohao's order? Wan Yin shook her head and said calmly, His Highness is in closed-door training and has no time to pay attention to such trifles. As his subordinates, we should serve him and share his worries. Speaking of this, she looked solemn and bowed slightly. Taoism Peer Lin, please don't make it difficult for us. As long as you hand over the spirit-eating insect, we will leave immediately. Ho ho! Lin Sun suddenly chuckled and sighed. I really came to apologize. I was really here to apologize, but it turns out that I'm here to rob. No wonder I brought so many helpers. Should I feel honored, or should I feel ridiculous? P.S. There will be a small explosion tonight, and the second chapter will be released continuously. After the goldfish finishes eating, I will continue to write the third chapter. Chapter 13-19. Ridiculous? By gone Yushi, Yao Li and others were all cold. Lin Sun obviously didn't know his situation. His Highness once said that Taoism Pure Lin is not an ordinary person and should be respected. We don't want to become enemies with Taoism Pure Lin because of this. Wannin's expression was a little cold. She looked into the distance and said, "What's more, Taoism Pure Lin's two friends are fighting. If there is another fight at this moment, I'm afraid the consequences will be unpredictable." Everyone gasped. These words seemed to be an understatement, but everyone could feel the threat in it. At present, Alu and Yuan Fatian were fighting, and Jean Di and young Golden-Winged Rock were fighting. The battle was fierce. If Wannin and others joined in, how could Lin Sun turn the tide alone? This threat was too fierce. "Just you." Lin Sun glanced at the crowd and said casually, full of disdain. In the past 6 months, Lin Sun's cultivation had made his cultivation progress to the extreme. His strength was no longer comparable to that of the past. No matter how many opponents there were, Lin Sun couldn't be afraid at all. "Arrogant!" Bai Gan snorted. Half a year ago, he was defeated by Lin Sun. But in the past 6 months, his combat power had already been transformed, and he got some good fortune in the real dragon's lair, which made him more confident when facing Lin Sun again. "Taoism Pure Lin Sun, as long as you hand over the spirit-eating bugs, we promise we won't embarrass you. Why are you so stubborn?" Yushi sighed softly in a soft voice. "For the sake of His Highness, we don't want to be enemies with Taoism Pure Lin. Please help us." Yao Li's voice was ethereal and cold. "Hand over the spirit-eating bugs." Yen Shan and Yen Hai spoke at the same time. Their words were concise and comprehensive, and their eyebrows were full of determination and killing intent. "Fellow Taoist Lin, even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for those two friends of yours. Not to mention that if we really had ill intent, we would have directly made a move against you a long time ago, and we wouldn't persuade you with such kind words at all." Wannin also spoke with a solemn and serious look, as if she was giving an ultimatum. "It's nothing more than a robbery. Why do you say it so hypocritically?" Lin Sun sneered. In fact, killing intent had already been stirred in his heart. It could be said that he had single-handedly raised Little Silver, who was like a relative to him. How could he just give him up? But these people actually dared to target Little Silver. This had already crossed Lin Sun's bottom line. The opponent's lineup was indeed terrifying, enough to make any powerhouse in the Upper Nine realm afraid. However, Lin Sun had been fighting all the way with indomitable perseverance and strength. When had he ever been afraid of any threat? So what if he was surrounded by enemies from all directions? "I will suppress them with my own strength. Miss Wannin, there's no need to waste your breath. Just directly capture him and take the God-Eater bugs away." Bai Gan was seething with killing intent. Boom. He made a move, eager to wash away the shame of being defeated by Lin Sun last time. He pinched the Taoist incantation with both hands. A dazzling electric light swept out with monstrous killing intent, like the spear of death in the hand of the god of Hades, aiming at Lin Sun. The void there was torn apart, producing ear-piercing explosions. In the distance, the crowd was shocked. Even though they were very far away, they could feel the horror of this blow, which made their hair stand on end. As soon as Bai Gan made a move, he showed the monstrous killing power of the White Tiger bloodline, which was far more powerful than they had imagined. How dare a loser show off? Lin Sun's eyes were indifferent. He stood there with his hands behind his back, and there was an invisible power of the Great Way rising around him, turning into an abyss-like vision. Boom! When the dazzling electric light, which was as thick as a tree trunk, struck in front of Lin Sun, It was dissolved without a trace like a clay ox entering the sea. Lin Sun didn't move at all. Only his black hair fluttered in the wind. Seeing this strange and shocking scene, Wan Yin, Yu Shi, Yao Li and others all narrowed their eyes and showed a trace of solemnity. It was no wonder that they mobilized a large number of people to come here. This demon god Lin was indeed frighteningly powerful. The people in the distance were dumbfounded and tongue-tied. These days, there were many people who came to Flying Star Mountain to challenge Lin Sun, but they didn't see him show up at all. They all thought that he was afraid and retreated. But now they understood that demon god Lin, who had been dormant here for half a year, had become even more terrifying than before. He seemed simple, plain, and ordinary, but in fact, his combat strength had already reached an unfathomable level. "I'll give you one last chance. Retreat now. Otherwise, even if Xiao Hao comes, I will kill all of you," Lin Sun said coldly with his hands behind his back. However, his warning was viewed as a great provocation, causing a smear of coldness to appear on the faces of Wan Yin and the others. "Kill!" Baigon shouted, and a platinum halberd swept through the air, stirring up a storm. Rumble! Visible to the naked eye, rolling killing intent gathered in the halberd, giving off a terrible vision of ghosts crying and the sun sinking and the moon being destroyed. The power of this blow shocked the people in the distance to the point that their souls almost flew out of their bodies. The descendant of the white tiger deserved to be comparable to the god of slaughter. The power he exerted with the power of the 7 tribulations of longevity realm was unimaginably horrible. "It seems that you have made up your mind." Suddenly, a killing intent flashed in Lin Sun's eyes. "Today, I'll tell you what it means to ask for humiliation." As Lin Sun finished speaking, a snow-white sharpness swept out from his body and went straight to the sky. It was like a white rainbow piercing the sun, with incomparably fierce sharpness. Boom! The broken blade collided with the platinum halberd, and suddenly a deafening roar broke out, shattering the void and turning the clouds into powder. Some strong people's spiritual awareness was stinging, and it was difficult for them to see clearly. Break! Lin Sun's clothes were fluttering, and his black hair was fluttering. His original simple and plain aura was suddenly replaced by a terrible and frightening momentum. It was as if he had transformed into a devil god that had walked out of the holiness. His imposing aura caused the clouds in the surroundings to shatter into pieces, the sun and moon to dim down, and the heavens and the earth to be dim. Only his tall figure seemed eternal. "Kill!" Baigon's white hair fluttered wildly, and his whole body was full of murderous intent. A platinum halberd flew and fiercely collided with the broken blade. However, with a bang, the platinum halberd was directly shaken off and almost flew out of his hand, causing Baigon to stagger and feel numb in his arms. His expression suddenly became solemn. Bang! After another confrontation, Baigon let out a muffled groan. He realized that his strength was obviously inferior to Lin Sun, and he suffered a disadvantage. Slash! Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and the broken blade let out a clear cry. It was unimaginably fast, like a flash of light, as if it had cut through the shackles of space. Baigon's face changed slightly, and he dodged. Confrontation! Almost at the same time, Yu Shi, who noticed that Baigon was in a bad situation, made a move. She threw her white palm, and a green seal rose into the air and bloomed like a lotus, giving people a sense of perfection, light, and holiness. However, the divine radiance emitted by the seal was bloody and terrifying, and it was like numerous rays of blood-red light that obstructed the broken blade. Bang! However, the bloody rainbow was instantly torn apart by the broken blade like a piece of cloth, and even the seal was blasted flying with a wail. Yushi's pretty face turned pale as she suddenly took a few steps back, and she was astounded in her heart. Only when she truly fought Lin Sun did she realize how terrifying his strength was. It was simply like a vast ocean, and it carried the might of a landslide and a tsunami. After all, she was in existence at the seventh tribulation of longevity, and her natural talent was shocking. She didn't take ordinary geniuses on the gold rankings seriously. But her attack was directly defeated by Lin Sun. However, Yushi's attack this time had helped Bai Gon win a chance to catch his breath and free himself from being passive. Kill. Bai Gon and Yushi joined forces, and they respectively attacked with the platinum halberd and the green seal, causing the broken blade to shake. At the same time, swoosh! Yao Li's figure flickered in the distance and vanished into thin air, and his speed was shockingly swift. In the next moment, he'd already appeared before Lin Sun, and then he opened his mouth and spat out a silver flying sword that was only 3 inches long, and it shot out explosively towards Lin Sun's throat. It was almost impossible to describe this blow. It was too fast and too fierce. The aura emitted by the 3-inch silver flying sword was overwhelming and boundlessly violent. Wind shadow stab. This was Yao Li's talent power. It was as swift as the wind and invisible, and its power was like the attack of a ghost. Just the momentum contained in it was enough to destroy the opponent's mind and fighting spirit. Humph! Lin Sun's expression was calm, but there was a bright and crystal-clear fist force that burst out at this critical moment as if it had eyes. Boom! The void burst and collapsed. The bright fist force forcibly blocked the 3-inch flying sword, and the power released by the fist force caused the 3-inch flying sword to be smashed with a bang. With a puff, Yao Li coughed up blood. He only felt the qi and blood all over his body rolling, and he retreated without hesitation. How can he be so powerful? That's the flying soul sword I refined with magic materials, and it was actually blocked? No wonder he dares to call himself Demon God. Yao Li was shocked. He originally thought that he and Lin Sun were in the same realm, and the gap was not big, but now it seemed that he was wrong. Bang! At the same time, there was a loud noise in the distance. The platinum halberd and the cyan Taoist seal that attacked the broken sword were forcibly broken, wailing incessantly. Especially on the cyan Taoist seal, a mark was left on it, which made Yushi suffer a backfire and let out a muffled groan. As for Bai Gon, he was trembling all over. In the collision with the broken sword just now, he felt like being bombarded by a holy mountain all the time. The terrible force made him almost cough up blood. All of this took a long time to describe, yet it actually occurred in the blink of an eye. It was completed in one go, and it was swift to a shocking extent. But Lin Sun forcibly broke through the attack of the 3 peerless, merciless people. The disdainful power made Wan Yin, Yan Shan and Yan Hai, who had not yet attacked, slightly change their faces and look solemn. In the distance, the spectators didn't even have time to react. There was no doubt that if they fought alone, neither Bai Gon, Yushi nor Yao Li could defeat Lin Sun. Let's go together. At this time, Bai Gon and the others looked at each other and tacitly attacked together without hesitation. They all knew that if they wanted to kill Lin Sun, they had to join hands. Chapter 1320. Boom. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, and Taoist light rumbled in the sky. The crowd in the distance trembled. They had been paying attention to the fight between Old Toad and Ah Lu, but now their attention was drawn to the unprecedented battle in front of them. Bai Gon held the platinum halberd like a god of death. Yushi controlled the green Taoist seal to suppress all directions. Yao Li's figure flickered, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. This was only the 3 of them. Apart from them, Wan Yin, Yan Shan, and Yan Hai were still watching coldly from the sidelines. Break! Accompanied by a calm rebuke, the clear hum of the broken blade resounded through the heavens. The 3 people besieging Lin Sun staggered back from the shock. All of them had gloomy expressions on their faces. Compared to the last time they met in the tomb, Demon God Lin had not only broken through a realm in cultivation, but even his combat strength was completely different. Yan Shan, Yan Hai, you two go too. Wan Yin's ethereal voice resounded like the sounds of nature. Boom. Yan Shan was the first to rush out and press down with his palm. The palm suddenly became the size of a millstone. It seemed to be made of divine gold and flowed with Taoist light. It was like the hand of a god, oppressing the world. Crack, crack. Before the palm fell, the nearby void let out an unbearable explosion. Even the void near Lin Sun was twisting and surging, as if it couldn't bear it. This was a body practitioner. His body was like a divine treasure, and his power could shake the world. Yen Shan had already stepped into the seventh tribulation of longevity, and his body cultivation was incomparably condensed. He was a descendant of the evil demon clan, and his body was innately comparable to refined steel and divine jade. He had also inherited the ancient Khanate diabolism secret method, so his combat strength was extraordinary. Get lost! In the field, Lin Sun's eyes flashed with cold lightning, and he also punched. A simple and ordinary fist force appeared in the void, glowing with a faint green light. The nearby void suddenly collapsed. This fist contained the power of Xing An's devouring of the heavenly way. Using Lin Sun's own power of the Great Way, he could release a world-destroying power with every move. It looked ordinary, but it was actually invisible. Bang! The millstone-sized hand exploded in midair. In the distance, Yen Shan, who had just rushed into the battlefield, suddenly shook his body. Lin Sun's godlike punch had already pressed on his body. Crackle! Under the astounded gazes of everyone present, the clothes on Yen Shan's body were blasted into pieces and fluttered in the air like firecrackers, and his entire body was blasted flying. They came fast and retreated even faster. If Yen Hai had not arrived in time to stabilize his body, this punch alone would have sent him flying. So powerful! Yen Shan and Yen Hai's eyes narrowed as their hearts trembled. Body refiners like them possessed extremely formidable strength like ancient dragons and elephants, and what they feared the least was a head-on collision. Amongst those of the same cultivation, they were entirely capable of easily suppressing qi refiners. But Lin Sun's strength was much stronger than Yen Shan's, which was unexpectedly terrifying. Fiend God Lin is currently battling those three, but he can casually send Yen Shan retreating with a punch. This is way too ferocious, right? Someone exclaimed in the distance. Kill! Yen Shan and Yen Hai's faces darkened as they joined the battle. Their attacks were ferocious, concentrated, and overbearing. They were like two enormous mountains that swept through space with the intention of crushing all enemies. The surging qi and blood made everyone present horrified. All of a sudden, Lin Sun was besieged by 5 peerless, merciless people. But to everyone's surprise, at this moment, Lin Sun suddenly let out a loud laugh. You're just SOSO. Boom. As soon as his voice fell, Lin Sun's aura became more and more terrifying. His whole body was like a great abyss between heaven and earth, and there were scenes of stars being annihilated in the void around him. Everything in the surrounding area was being devoured, collapsed, and wailed. What was the demeanor of a fiend god? Before, Lin Sun was simple and plain, making people unable to feel his demeanor. But now, when he showed his sharpness, everyone had a feeling. This was what a fiend god should be like. Chop! The broken blade shot out like a shocking rainbow, and with a bang, the cyan Taoist seal trembled and cracks appeared on its surface. Boom! At the same time, Lin Sun's boundless fist strength turned into yin and yang tai chi fish, obliterating the killing attacks of Yen Shan and Yen Hai. Lin Sun's body bounced back in an instant, and his back, like a dragon coming out of the abyss, slammed into Yao Li. Yao Li, who had just appeared behind Lin Sun like a ghost, was knocked out before he could make a move. He screamed. At this moment, he suspected that he had been hit by the primordial dragon elephant, and his body felt like it was about to explode. Swish! However, at the same time, Baigon's halberd was about to hit Lin Sun, but it was blocked by an old blood-stained shield halfway. Clang! A deafening bang broke out, and the shield was shaken out with sparks flying everywhere. But taking advantage of this opportunity, Lin Sun jumped out and punched out like lightning. In an instant, thousands of punches had burst out, enveloping Bygone. Bang! 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 Bygone only felt the terrifying punches from all directions like landslides and tsunamis, which made his arms hurt, his body tremble, and his chi and blood tumble. Even if he resisted with all his might, he was still shaken to the point of being injured, and blood flowed from his mouth and nose. It was only when Yushi, Yen-shan, and the others came over to help him that he was able to escape such a blow. However, his entire body was already bleeding, and numerous wounds had cracked open on his body, causing him to seem to be in an extremely sorry state. In a short period of a few breaths, Lin Sun had almost broken through the encirclement, and all his opponents were more or less injured, whereas he was invincible. Everyone in the distance was completely dumbstruck. They were able to imagine that Lin Sun was extremely formidable, yet they never imagined that he was formidable to such an unimaginable extent. "You deserve death." Bygone's eyes were bloodshot as he roared, and it seemed like a white tiger had surged into appearance behind his figure. It stepped on the starry sky, and it was a shocking scene. Boundless killing intent overflowed from his body like tidewater, and it covered the heavens and the earth as it swept out. Yushi, Yaoli, Yen-shan, Yen-hai, and the others had livid expressions as well, and they were completely infuriated. Every single one of them possessed a rare reserve and combat strength. Even though they were nameless in the past, they'd never taken the ordinary figures on the Heavenly Talent Gold rankings seriously. But today they couldn't even suppress demonic god Lin despite joining forces. This caused them to feel ashamed, and they felt extremely humiliated. Kill! They didn't hesitate to unleash their full might. Yushi took out a bloody thorn ring. Yao Li's glabella revealed a strange double pupil that suffused with a strange jade light. Yen-shan and Yen-hai transformed into 300-meter-tall figures like ancient fiend gods, and their vital energy and blood surged around them. In an instant, the 5 experts that could suppress an area attacked without holding back. The power they released was so great that it was like a surging black cloud that covered the heavens and the earth. It also seemed like the galaxy had been shattered, and the heavens and the earth were in chaos while the sun and moon lost their light. That area was completely a terrifying scene of an apocalypse. Halberd, bloody thorn ring, double pupil, lightning, vital energy and blood, 5 types of energy were like 5 peerless killing tribulations, and they carried an unparalleled momentum as they enveloped Lin Sun alone. At this moment, the minds of many people in the distance shook, and they couldn't help but close their eyes. If they forced themselves to watch the battle due to the disparity in their realms, they would also be shocked. And Lin Sun, who was in the midst of it, had a pair of burning torches in his black eyes. It was a burning fighting spirit. Only at this moment was his fighting spirit fully aroused. Previously, it was simply not enough. Boom! A tsunami-like power surged in his body, and his organs rumbled like thunder. In an instant, he was like a copper cauldron in a chaotic world, releasing the power to burn the heavens. Open! The cold light in Lin Sun's eyes surged, and the broken blade cut through the void with a clang. This slash was called life and death. Opening the path of life and death between life and death was the first time Lin Sun used the power of various great ways after Tao fusion. Heaven and earth seemed unable to bear it, and the void was torn apart like a piece of cloth. Only the bright broken blade covered all the light and shadows, becoming the only edge. Rumble! At this moment, everyone felt a vast expanse of whiteness in front of them. Their vision and hearing had all disappeared, and their souls were in a throbbing state. They could only rely on their instincts to sense the shaking of the heavens and the earth, the shattering of all things, and the turbulent flow of energy that swept through the surroundings. After a long time, when everyone recovered from their shock, they seemed to be in a trance from extreme shock. Who exactly won this strike? After that, they saw Lin Sun's tall figure standing in the sky. At the same time, the expressions of Yushi, Bygone, Yao Li, and the others in the distance changed indeterminately, and they more or less seemed to be in a sorry state. The outcome of this strike was actually a draw. Lin Sun hadn't been suppressed. Lin Sun, your combat strength can be said to be extraordinary indeed, and no one in the same generation can match you at close range. But how many times can you resist similar attacks? Suddenly, Wanyin spoke in an ethereal voice from afar. Brother Lin, stop. Miss Wanyin has always been merciful and hasn't attacked you. If you persist in going about things the wrong way, then there'll be no room for negotiation. Yushi spoke. By gone, Yao Li, Yen Shan, Yen Hai, and the others had cold expressions. Everyone was shocked. Wanyin was undoubtedly the strongest one. If she also joined the battle, the consequences would be really unpredictable. Is it worth risking your life for a spirit-eating bug? Wanyin sighed faintly. What a joke. Aren't you willing to be enemies with me for the spirit-eating bug? Aren't you afraid of losing your life? Lin Sun sneered, and his eyes were full of divine light. There was an invisible disdain rising in his eyes. What's more, even if you join me, so what? Stubborn. Bygone snorted. Ho ho. Lin Sun's face was full of sarcasm. Around him, an unprecedented terrifying aura suddenly spread, making his power more and more frightening. The faces of Wanyin and others suddenly changed. This guy's aura actually became stronger. How could it be possible? Did he not use all his strength before? If it's really like that, then it's too horrifying. For a moment, even Wanyin's expression became solemn and dignified. As I said, this time I'll let you understand what it means to bring disgrace upon yourself. In an indifferent and calm voice, Lin Sun restrained the emotion on his face. He was calm and there was no ripple in his eyes. There was only extreme coldness left. After saying that, he stepped on the void and suddenly disappeared. At this moment, Lin Sun finally attacked with all his strength without reservation. P.S. This is the 3rd chapter, and there will be the 4th chapter at around 12 o'clock in the morning. Don't forget to smash your monthly ticket if you enjoy it. Chapter 1321. It wasn't that Lin Sun had been holding back. He had been vigilant to see if Wanyin would take this opportunity to attack Alu or Old Toad. But now, he had nothing to worry about. Because both Old Toad and Alu stopped fighting with Yuan Fatian and the young golden-winged roc. This was because of the intervention of the big black bird. The reason was simple. Yuan Fatian and the young golden-winged roc weren't on the same side as Wanyin. Naturally, they didn't want to be used by Wanyin at this time. Therefore, under the intervention of the big black bird, both sides stopped fighting and chose to stand aside. This was undoubtedly bad news for Wanyin and the others. After all, the reason why they dared to threaten Lin Sun before was that Old Toad and Alu were fighting fiercely and would probably distract Lin Sun. But now all of this was gone. For Lin Sun, he had nothing to worry about and could naturally go all out. How terrifying was Lin Sun when he went all out? Everyone saw it immediately. There was a sudden explosion in the void. The next moment, Lin Sun had already reached Yen Shan. Even with Yen Shan's reflexes, he could only choose to resist but couldn't dodge when he was caught off guard. Tut! Yen Shan's lips made a sound, and a layer of black jade-like halo appeared around him like an upside-down bell, protecting his body. Phantoms of demon venerables appeared on the light shield, making obscure demonic sounds. Boundless demon incantation. This was an extremely powerful body protection method. It was said that it originated from the ancient demon path, and was comparable to the unbreakable Vajra body of Buddhism. It had the power to stand firm even if the sky falls and the earth cracks. In addition, Yen Shan's arms suddenly became extremely thick, and dense Taoist patterns appeared on his skin. Then, he slapped out horizontally. This was another world-shocking divine ability called the Power Devil's Arm. Lifting one's hand and throwing a divine mountain was as easy as picking up a feather. But how terrifying was Lin Sun's punch? It was a blow released with all his strength after using Fight Saint method and Yazi's Fury. Bang! There was a loud explosion. The powerful power devil's arm exploded inch by inch. Flesh and blood splashed everywhere. Then, with a bang, the black jade-like light shield shook violently. It couldn't hold on any longer and exploded. The boundless devil tactics, which gave many strong practitioners a headache in ancient times, was easily broken by Lin Sun with one punch. After that, Yen Shan's body that was sturdy like an extreme weapon was forcefully blasted flying like a flying arrow, and he was barely able to stop his body after flying over 1 kilometer away. His face was flushed red, and his mouth and nose were filled with unstoppable blood. Everyone noticed to their horror that there was a 4-inch deep fist mark on his chest. One could imagine that the power released by this punch had already rushed into his body and caused terrifying damage. A wave of gasps resounded in the surroundings. Yen Shan, such a tyrannical body refinement cultivator, was almost crippled by a single punch. Even Wan Yin, Bai Gan, Yu Shi, and the others had gloomy expressions at this moment, and their hearts shook. The strength Lin Sun revealed made them feel a real threat. "I wonder how many times you can resist my attacks?" Lin Sun stood in the air with his black hair fluttering in the wind. His eyes were as cold as an abyss, and his power was so strong that it made the sky dim. In the distance, Yuan Fatian and the young golden-winged rock king looked at each other and could see the surprise in each other's eyes. Lin Sun's strength surprised them as well. "Let's do it together." Wan Yin sighed softly. Her figure seemed to be bathed in misty rain, hazy and illusory. As soon as she finished speaking, a green flying sword appeared out of thin air. In an instant, she seemed to have changed into a different person. She had an extra sharp and ethereal aura, like a female sword fairy with peerless grace and brilliance. Just her aura alone made everyone look at her. Everyone knew that this woman must be extraordinary since she could make Bai Gan and the others follow her lead. But only when she truly revealed her power did people realize how powerful her aura was. That peerless aura was like a divine moon that people could only look up to. Misty rain. Amidst the clear and cold voice, the green flying sword flashed out swiftly, and it was like a gentle wisp of misty rain that drifted through the heavens and the earth. It was extremely beautiful and terrifying to the extreme. Swoosh, swoosh. The void was torn apart like a piece of paper. The blurred sword light spread out like a nightmare, but it could suppress and kill ghosts and gods. Clang. Almost at the same time, the broken sword slashed out. However, at this moment, Lin Sun had already used the extreme inheritance, and its power had skyrocketed compared to before. A blade and a sword carried out a peerless battle in the void. Kill! Bai Gan, Yu Shi, and the others attacked as well. Several forces swept out like a galaxy, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Swoosh! Lin Sun's figure disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of Yu Shi. Among the 6 of them, this woman was the weakest and the least threatening. In the previous battle, Lin Sun had already figured out their strength. Condense! Yu Shi's expression changed. The green seal soared into the sky and turned into the shadow of a bloody swanee, as if it had rushed out from hell. However, at this moment, Lin Sun had already utilized his full strength, so how terrifying was his strength? Merely a single punch had directly destroyed the shadow of the swanee and shattered the green seal. Moreover, even Yu Shi's figure was drowned by the vast force of the punch and died miserably within it. However, unexpectedly, Yu Shi's figure had strangely appeared once more in the nearby area. However, her countenance was extremely pale, and her aura was extremely weak. "I'm afraid you can't use this life-saving ability many times, right?" Lin Sun sneered. Yu Shi's expression was covered in terror. At that moment just now, she'd truly felt the threat of death. It was too terrifying, and it caused her to feel extreme despair and helplessness. "Stop him!" In the distance, a sweet and clear voice resounded. She was unable to escape, and she was being attacked by Lin Sun's broken sword at full force. Only after she truly fought Lin Sun did she realize how terrifying an opponent he was, and even her ultimate technique in the sword Dao that she was extremely proud of had been suppressed by him. Kill! Bai Gan, Yao Li, and the others suddenly charged forward. For a time, fierce battles broke out in the field, and the world seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Terrifying waves swept in all directions, which shocked all the heroes. Lin Sun alone fought against Wan Yin and the others, but he was still invincible and powerful. This was completely beyond everyone's expectation. After hundreds of confrontations, Lin Sun pressed out his finger like the arrival of spring and autumn. Yao Li's body was just about to retreat, but it was too late, and he was directly pressed by the force of Lin Sun's finger. With a bang, Yao Li's body seemed to explode. His flesh and blood were badly mutilated, and he let out a shrill scream as he flew backward. Boom! However, when Lin Sun wanted to chase after him, Bai Gan and the others had already arrived. But everyone could see that the advantage was tilting to Lin Sun. Up to this point, Yu Shi and Yao Li were both seriously injured and extremely weak. They were no longer a threat to Lin Sun. Yan Shan had also been injured. Although he was a body practitioner, which didn't affect his fighting ability, the power he could exert was much weaker than before. In addition, the situation of Bai Gan and Yan Hai was not optimistic either. They could barely contain Lin Sun. As for Wan Yin, the peerless female swordsman, she was naturally stunning and had outstanding combat power. Unfortunately, when she appeared, she met Lin Sun, who had released all his strength. Although she was strong, Lin Sun was stronger than her. Of course, if it weren't for Wan Yin, which forced Lin Sun to kill with the broken sword, the battle would have been over long ago. This made the people watching the battle in the distance fall into a trance. Before, when Lin Sun was besieged, almost no one thought that he would be in trouble this time. Who would have thought that the situation would be abruptly reversed under the suppression of his powerful combat power? This is Demon God Lin. Some people were shocked. Yuan Fatian and the young golden-winged Rock King looked extremely solemn. This time, their purpose was to deal with Lin Sun, but they first encountered two strong opponents, Alu and Old Toad. Before the outcome of the battle was decided, they witnessed Lin Sun's unprecedented battle, which made them feel extremely amazed, shocked and surprised. Their hearts were heavy and they felt a little stuffy. It's said that your white tiger bloodline is the descendant of the god of slaughter, but how many of my moves can you resist? In the field, Lin Sun suddenly laughed and suddenly exerted his might. He rushed forward and attacked Bai Gan with all his strength. Go to hell! Bai Gan's eyes were bloodshot, and the killing intent around him was wild. When he heard Lin Sun's words, he seemed to have gone mad and erupted with terrifying power. But no matter how he struggled, he was completely suppressed by Lin Sun. Every punch of Lin Sun was like an immortal performing martial arts. It was unsophisticated, plain and natural, but its power was astonishing. After only a dozen moves, Lin Sun punched out, and with a clang, Bai Gan's platinum halberd flew out of his hand. His wrist was broken, causing blood to flow, and he let out a painful groan as his figure staggered back in the void. However, what made Lin Sun frown was that when he wanted to kill Bai Gan, the twin brothers Yan Shan and Yan Hai rushed over again. These two body refiners possessed extremely terrifying and abnormal physical strength. Moreover, their recovery ability was extremely shocking. Even if they suffered an injury, they seemed as if they didn't notice it at all, causing them to be extremely difficult to deal with. Let me see if both of you can actually resist this sword strike of mine. Lin Sun took a deep breath as a wisp of coldness flashed in his eyes. Swoosh! The tip of his finger sliced lightly. A wisp of sword chi appeared abruptly. It was extremely dazzling and fierce, and it seemed as if it had pierced through the ages and arrived here with an indomitable and all-powerful momentum. Shit! In the distance, Wan Yin's expression turned grim. She'd once witnessed how terrifying this sword move of Lin Sun's was, and it caused her to be unable to dodge in time. Dodge quickly! she warned. But she was obviously a step too late. The sword chi was too world-shocking, and it was utterly indescribable with words. The heavens and the earth seemed as if they'd been slashed into two by this sword strike, and it was unstoppable. Before the spectators in the distance could react to what had happened, they saw the brothers Yen Shan and Yen Hai, who charged towards Lin Sun, had their bodies that were as strong as imperial weapons slashed into two. Fresh blood sprayed down like a waterfall. A straight crack was plowed out in the void, and it stretched for 4,000 kilometers in the sky, causing the heavens and the earth to dim down at this moment. Everyone present was shocked, and there was a moment of deathly silence. The might of a single sword strike was actually terrifying to such an extent. What sword move was this? P.S. The fourth update is here. Besides that, let me explain that Lin Sun was able to fight on two fronts because he cultivated both the soul and chi at the same time, whereas the broken blade was a divine weapon controlled by the divine sense.